Chapter 2472, Cultivation in Buddhism. Although the Heart Sutra was considered an introductory study of Buddhism, it was also a classic sacred text of Buddhism, full of infinite wisdom and wonder. Futian deeply immersed himself in it. The content in the Heart Sutra was not much, and it was a little too obscure and dull for beginners. Once he entered into the space of total fascination, Futian seemed to exist in the space of Buddhism. He sat cross-legged and surrounded by Buddhist runes. Faintly, lingering sounds of Buddha could be heard, which was transmitted into the ears of those who could hear it, and it was deafening and unmistakable. A Buddha lamp was lit next to him, which seemed to also light up the heart for Buddha inside of him. Futian almost felt that he had always been a Buddhist cultivator and was now comprehending Buddhist scriptures. As time passed, Futian was surrounded by the light of Buddha. It was as if he had been covered with a layer of gold all over his body. The white garment on him faintly glowed with a golden radiance. Others were also leafing through these Buddhist scriptures next to them, but they were browsing. Even if no cultivation was involved, reading these Buddhist scriptures and meditating on them was beneficial. Futian stayed here for about a month before leaving. Soon after, Hua Qingqing took him to other ancient temples to study and comprehend Buddhist scriptures that were there and cultivate Buddhist superpowers. After coming to the sacred land of Western Heaven, Futian was immersed in the cultivation of Buddhism. In a blink of an eye, 2 months passed. Futian had been wandering among the ancient temples during this time. The time he stayed in each location became shorter and shorter. Recently, it seemed that he was simply observing, then leaving right after. It was more like taking a tour of the place rather than cultivating. In the meantime, at the sacred land of Western Heaven, the atmosphere of all Buddha's fest was hitting a high point. The entire Western Heaven was more festive and lively than ever. There were already many people who were talking about the upcoming All Buddhas conference. It was rumored that some great Buddhas had already arrived on the spirit mountains of all the heavens in the world of Buddhism, and they had stepped into the sacred land of Western Heavens. Some even claimed they had seen those figures with their own eyes. At this time, in a place of Buddhist cultivation in the Western Heaven, the light of Buddha surrounds this space, full of peace and joy. In one place, there was an eminent monk who was giving a lecture. Many Buddhist cultivators sat and listened quietly, their visage majestic and dignified. The light of Buddha lingered all around them as if they were preparing for the coming of the All Buddhas conference. When the lecture was over, the phantom of those Buddhas in front gradually disappeared. The light of Buddha still circulated in the quiet space upon those Buddhist cultivators. After a while, they opened their eyes and recited the Buddha's name in thanks. "How does everyone feel?" a cultivator asked with a smile. Buddha Lord's preaching was enlightening and refreshing. "The benefits are incredible," someone replied. "The Buddha Lord has an advanced and profound understanding of Buddhism and has elucidated some of my questions about the scriptures. I feel that my cultivation has improved a few more degrees because of it," another jumped in. "Arhat's cultivation has already reached the pinnacle, and now that your comprehension has improved even more, you must be getting close to crossing the Buddha's tribulation. This time at All Buddha's conference, you will outshine all the others." Everyone was talking and praising the man, who was none other than Shenyang Arhat. "What has that Futian been doing? Is he still reading the scriptures?" Shenyang Arhat asked around. In the sacred land of Western Heaven, Futian's every move could not be hidden from their eyes. The top-rated Buddha's clairvoyance could see through the endless space, and in the land of Western Heaven, they could directly zoom in on Futian's location and what he was doing. Therefore, Futian's cultivation in Buddhism did not escape their attention. Of course, Futian never thought of concealing his whereabouts or what he was doing. He knew that his every move was under the scrutiny of these Buddhist cultivators. Tianyin Arhat, for one, had been watching him from the shadows. He heard everything loud and clear when Futian was chatting with Yumu before. "Well, he has been wandering among the ancient temples of the Western Heaven, and no one has any idea as to his true intentions," someone else responded. "If you are speaking of cultivating Buddhism, going into a temple for a day or two then walking out of it is not the way to comprehend Buddhism." Some other cultivators gave their 2 cents with a smile. His smile was tinged with a slight sense of sarcasm, It seemed he was amused by Yi Futian's lack of self-awareness. Cultivation of Buddhism must avoid impatience. Although Yi Futian is talented, he has too high of a regard for himself. Perhaps he is eager to achieve success and wants to improve his realm by comprehending and cultivating in Buddhism. However, he is just wasting his time. What if he could really comprehend Buddhism, receiving some enlightenment, and cultivated some Buddhism methods? What is his intention? Someone asked, a little curious. He wants to follow the example of Donghuang the Great, participate in the All Buddhas Conference and defeat everyone there, a Buddhist cultivator replied with a smile, and everyone suddenly burst out laughing. The whole thing looked a little comical. There was a strong sense of mockery. To defeat all the Buddhas? The golden eyes of Shenyang Arhat shot out some terrifying sharp rays. If he comes to the All Buddhas Conference and asks to participate, whatever happens after that cannot be blamed on us. Yi Futian had not yet answered for the killings of their disciples, and now he wanted to participate in the All Buddhas Conference to defeat all the Buddhas. If this was not a crazy man's talk, what else could it be? The All Buddhas Conference was a major Buddhist event. What happened hundreds of years ago when Donghuang the Great visited was not known to too many people. Only some ancient Buddhas who had cultivated for many years knew exactly what happened once upon a time. But in their generation, and at this time, they would absolutely not allow a similar occurrence again in the Buddhist sect. After Donghuang the Great became emperor, what happened here was discussed in a positive light in the land of divine prefecture and was discussed ad nauseam. However, in the eyes of these Buddhists, their major event was crashed by some outsider, who then defeated all the Buddhas at their methods was certainly not viewed in a positive light. Especially those Buddhist cultivators, who were defeated by Donghuang the Great, must have had a difficult time swallowing their defeats. It was said that some great Buddhas had been in retreat ever since. They had been heavily affected by the event that took place hundreds of years ago and had not yet fully recovered from it. They seemed determined not to come out of their retreat until they had proved the great path. There was even a great Buddha whose existence ended in parinirvana because of what took place. In any case, this matter, within the Buddhist circle, it was definitely a dishonor. Of course, there were some top Buddhas who did not mind it. From their perspective, all beings were equal, and for that, they admired Donghuang the Great. This was because their philosophy in cultivating Buddhism was different from the rest. However, Yi Futian didn't know the things that were happening there. He continued to immerse in his own cultivation of Buddhist teachings and methods. Before they knew it, there was only 7 days' time left before the start of the All Buddhas Conference. Yi Futian stopped his comprehension of Buddhism and did not continue to cultivate in the ancient temple. At this moment, Yi Futian and his group were here, on top of a peak in the western heaven. Next to the cliff, one could survey the vast space of the western heaven below. Yi Futian sat with his legs crossed, surrounded by golden light. Now, it was no longer just a simple light of Buddha. His body seemed to have turned into a golden body. He was radiant all over. It was as if it was the body of an ancient golden Buddha. With this transformation, he was surrounded by many Buddhist runes, while sounds of Buddha lingered in the air. In Yi Futian's life palace, the entire life palace was surrounded by golden light of Buddha, as if it had been transformed into a Buddha's world. In this world, a massive and boundless Buddha shadow appeared above the firmament, like Dharma. It reflected upon Yi Futian, who was sitting cross-legged. Behind Yi Futian, Hua Jiyu and Hua Qingqing stood there quietly, watching him cultivate. "Looks like he doesn't need my help anymore," Hua Qingqing said softly. Yi Futian's comprehension and subsequent cultivation of Buddhism astounded her. Chapter 2473, Golden Coastal Region. Yi Futian opened his eyes. The golden light of Buddha gleamed around him. Faintly, there seemed to be sounds of Buddha lingering between heaven and earth, solemn and holy. The cultivation methods of Buddhism were indeed exceptional. It calms one's body and soul, elevating one's overall state of mind, Yi Futian whispered. Hua Jiyu and Hua Qingqing walked up behind him. Hua Jiyu smiled and said, "That's because all the Buddhist scriptures that Qingqing has been chosen for you are superior, making this effect possible." "It's not so," Hua Qingqing said softly. "In Buddhism, there was no such thing as superior or inferior among scriptures. as it is dependent on the person who seeks the enlightenment. However, the Buddhist scriptures I have chosen are in ascending order, which is indeed beneficial to the state of mind. But what truly matters is the cultivator himself. Obviously, Hua Qingqing was complimenting Yi Futian. Speaking of which, if it were not for your help, Qingqing, I would not have been able to enter into such state of cultivation so quickly. I think not just me, but anyone with you assisting in the cultivation of Buddhism, would be able to accomplish amazing results, Yi Futian concluded with a sigh. During this period of cultivation, Hua Qingqing's effect on him was as if she lit up his desire for Buddhism. He was already gifted with extraordinary talent, and because of the existence of his natal spirit, it was not difficult for him to cultivate any method of the Great Path. Now, with Hua Qingqing's help, it seemed that he was naturally suited for Buddhist cultivation. He was in perfect sync with it and was able to enter the state of Buddhist cultivation immediately. You two can stop praising each other. Hua Jiyu smiled softly. Although the cultivation of Buddhism is going smoothly, to participate in the All Buddhas Conference, you have to face many top-level great Buddhas in the Western world of Buddhism. Many of them are hostile towards you, including the Arhats. When she spoke of this, Hua Jiyu was not so optimistic anymore. Just as she said, she had absolute confidence in Yi Futian's cultivation. Although it had not been long since he cultivated Buddhism, he had already had astounding successes. Still, it all depended on what kind of opponents he would be facing. However, the All Buddhas Conference was a forum for Buddhist cultivation. If Yi Futian intruded into the conference by any other means, it would be seriously out of place and defied the original intent of the All Buddhas Conference. If there were one great Buddha who had experienced the divine tribulation of the Great Path among those Buddhist cultivators, Yi Futian would be hard-pressed to contend with that. I understand, Yi Futian nodded. Even though he felt some pressure, Yi Futian was trying to maintain a balanced mindset, which, perhaps, was related to his recent cultivation. He looked at Hua Qingqing and said, if we fail this time, we will have to find another way. We are just fighting for a chance this time. In fact, everything that happens in the sacred land of the Western Heaven must not be hidden from the Lord of all Buddhas. As long as he wants, everything will be known to him. Even if we fail, if the Lord of all Buddhas wants to receive me, he will. If he doesn't want to receive me, then he won't. Hua Qingqing seemed extremely at peace as she spoke casually. Although she did not possess a high level of cultivation, her mentality revealed extreme serenity. She was at ease with everything that was happening at the moment. Yi Futian nodded. Hua Qingqing's words were quite right. Buddhism had 6 superpowers and many other fascinating and amazing methods, the wonders of which were infinite. The Lord of all Buddhas cultivated all the methods of Buddhism, so how could he not know all that was happening in the sacred land of Western Heaven? At this time, there were footsteps behind them. It was Blind Tai who came over and said to Yi Futian, there are only a few days left before the All Buddhas Conference, and the cultivators of the Western Heaven have gathered in one direction. Those Buddhist cultivators have also gone there, preparing to go to the Spirit Mountain of the Western Heaven. Shouldn't we be getting ready to go as well? Yes. Yi Futian nodded and said, it is time to take off. After that, he contacted Mo Yunzi with his mind. Soon, Mo Yunzi arrived with Fang Kun and the others. He turned into his original form. Yi Futian and his group walked onto the back of the Golden Wing Rock. The rock's wings spread wide, breaking through the sky, rushing forward. At this moment, in the sky above the Western Heaven, there were cultivators everywhere, traveling by air. Many of them were Buddhist cultivators, surrounded by the light of Buddha. Yi Futian looked around to take in the sight. Countless many cultivators were in the air, and all of them were heading in the same direction. To the west of the Western Heaven, there was a golden coastal region. This area was said to be endowed with spirit, and only those who cultivated Buddhism may cross. Common cultivators, without exception, had no way to cross this sea. Therefore, this coastal region was also known as the Sea of Buddha. At this time, countless cultivators gathered in front of this golden coastal region. Their eyes looked far ahead, where the other end of the sea seemed to be connected with the sky. There, one could vaguely see the golden light of Buddha above the firmament, radiant beyond words, as if it was a world of Buddhism outside of this world. Everyone knew that was where Spirit Mountain of Western Heaven was located. Lord of all Buddhas had once cultivated there, and to this day, the Spirit Mountain of the Western Heaven was still considered the cultivation court of the Lord of all Buddhas. Of course, the Lord of all Buddhas had long since transcended the earthly world and was no longer bound by the 5 elements of heaven and earth. Now, it was most other Buddhas who cultivated at the Spirit Mountain. All those Buddhist cultivators clasped their hands in front of them, appearing exceedingly pious. They then stepped into the sea and traveled by Buddhist boats, dazzling with the light of Buddha, as if on a pilgrimage. Their entire bodies were submerged in the light of Buddha. As time progressed, many figures could be discerned in this golden sea, scattered in different places in the sea, but all were moving in the same direction. The scene was incredibly spectacular. Who knows when little monks like us will have the opportunity to participate in the All Buddhas Conference? Some Buddhist cultivators with a lower level of cultivation sighed and wondered. His eyes, which focused on the golden sea, were filled with endless yearning. He put his hands together and gestured towards the far distance as if in prayer. In the crowd, many cultivators were doing the same thing he was. That's a Buddhist cultivator under the tutelage of Tongchan Buddha Lord. Someone looked in a particular direction. Tongchan Arhat is also there, someone else added, looking at a wickedly handsome Buddhist cultivator. This group of cultivators stepped into the sea and moved forward. More and more great Buddhas were coming, but they moved forward in the same way, without any exception. This was the only way to reach the Spirit Mountain, as there were no other shortcuts. Even those top Buddha lords had to cross the sea in order to get there. As the time of the All Buddhas Conference drew closer, the number of people in this coastal region gradually decreased. Most of them had already gone to Spirit Mountain in advance, not wanting to miss the grand occasion of the All Buddhas Conference. When Futian and the others arrived, there were not so many people who were crossing the sea anymore. They walked to the very front of the coastal region, looking at the light of Buddha that was sprinkling down from the sky in the distance. The end of the sea seemed to be part of the sky, the ultimate holy land for those who cultivated Buddhism, Spirit Mountain of Western Heaven. However, Futian did not set off immediately but was waiting. When all the Buddhist cultivators were gone, he would then cross the sea. Chapter 2474, Buddhas at Spirit Mountain. As time went by, fewer and fewer people were crossing the Golden Sea. All Buddhas Fest had entered its last month, and the All Buddhas Conference would be held on the Spirit Mountain of Western Heaven. With no more Buddhist cultivators to cross over the Golden Sea, many cultivators held lotuses in their hands and placed them into the Golden Sea. Suddenly, those lotus blossoms seemed to be effused with a golden glow, drifting towards the center of the sea as if they were transforming into golden lotus flowers. Countless others repeated this same action. Soon, those who had released the lotus flowers clasped their hands together in front of them, worshipping the golden sea with their eyes closed. The sound of Buddha came out of their mouths. These tremendously pious folks seemed to be praying for blessings. The sound of Buddha reverberated throughout heaven and earth as if forming a resonance in this corner of the world. Futian stood in front of the coast. With the sound of Buddha in his ears, he was compelled to clasp his hands together as well. His expression was one of great solemnity. Nowadays, he considered himself one of the Buddhist cultivators. In their own ways, these cultivators of Buddhism seemed to pray for the success of the All Buddhas Conference. And something seemed to respond to this sound of Buddha, which lingered between heaven and earth. At the end of the Golden Sea, where it bordered the sky, the infinitely dazzling light of Buddha lit up, then sprinkled over the sea. The light covered this boundless coastal region with an even brighter golden glow. Even a sound of Buddha came from yonder, which created some kind of resonance with the sound of Buddha on this side. Suddenly, many Buddhist cultivators who were unable to cross the sea sat cross-legged by the sea and cultivated there with their eyes closed. The sight in front of them was so spectacular and palpable that Chen Yi, Fang Kun, and the others felt its solemnity and holiness as well. They couldn't help but bow, with their hands clasped in front of them, to the other end of the sea. Conceivably, this light of Buddha must be a sign signifying the start of the All Buddhas Conference. Long afterward, the sound of Buddha that lingered between heaven and earth gradually dissipated, But the light of Buddha remained, it continued to illuminate the world. Gradually, some left, while others still sat by the edge of the sea to cultivate. The coastal region with so many people cultivating was, in fact, strangely quiet. "When are you leaving?" Chen Yi walked next to Yi Futian and asked. Yi Futian glanced into the distance and whispered, "It's about time." As he was speaking, he looked at Hua Qingqing beside him and said, "Qingqing, are you ready?" "Yes," Hua Qingqing nodded. Her face was very tranquil, and her beautiful eyes were clear and pure. "Let's go then," Yi Futian said with a smile. His heart was without disturbance. Hua Jiyu stood on the other side and whispered, "You two be careful." "I know." Yi Futian smiled at Hua Jiyu, knowing that she was still a little nervous. Only Hua Qingqing and he would embark on this journey. Hua Jiyu and the others did not cultivate Buddhism, therefore, they could not cross the sea. Yi Futian and Hua Qingqing stepped into the golden water, and a Buddha boat appeared at their feet, drifting forward and carried them into the golden sea. Master, Little Ling, Fang Kun, and the others stepped forward and looked towards the departing figure of Yi Futian. They were all a little unsure. On this trip, their master was about to go to the spirit mountain of Western Heaven, where all the Buddhas would be gathering. Among these Buddhas, there was no telling how many strong cultivators there would be. If they wanted to kill Yi Futian, he would have no way of fighting back. Yi Futian waved his hand with his back towards them. He then sat cross-legged on the Buddha boat, as a light of Buddha illuminated upon him. It was as if he had been incarnated into a Buddha himself. Hua Qingqing stood behind him with a small smile on her face as she looked at the far end of the sea. Her garments, likewise, were bathed in the light of Buddha. With her hands clasped together, her visage was one of solemn majesty, it was like that of a bodhisattva. All the countless people in front of the sea regarded that lonely Buddha boat in front of them with surprise. The sight before them was as perfect as a painting. Were these two on their way to the spirit mountain of Western Heaven? The two of them floated on the sea in the Buddha boat, moving forward. The Buddha sea was like a golden mirror. When Yi Futian looked down at his reflection in the sea, he did not know whether he was traveling in the water or that he was walking in the sky. Yi Futian smiled, then closed his eyes, cultivating quietly. He was allowing the Buddha boat to float forward without distraction or worry. Hua Qingqing stood there quietly as if she was in charge of the advancement of the boat. Bathed in the light of Buddha, she appeared sacred and beautiful. The Buddha boat moved forward slowly, and it seemed to be very far away from the other end of the sea. They had no idea when they would ever arrive. Day by day, the time went by. In a blink of an eye, more than 20 days had passed. The Buddha boat was still floating in the Golden Sea, easily losing the passage of time. Hua Qingqing and Yi Futian did not exchange one word, they were extremely quiet. The end of Western Heaven is still far away, but they did not feel the least bit of impatience. This was the Buddha Sea, and the Buddha Sea had cognizance of its own. When they were allowed to cross over, they would arrive. If the Buddha Sea did not want them to cross, they would not get there no matter how much they forced it. This here was the Buddha's world. As they were still drifting, Yi Futian continued to cultivate quietly and comprehend the Buddhist methods. Hua Qingqing, likewise, stood there quietly, without disturbing Yi Futian's cultivation. After some time had passed, the All Buddhas Conference had been progressing for more than 20 days at this point, with only the last 3 days remaining. Hua Qingqing realized that they were still on the sea, and the distance to Spirit Mountain at the end of the sea had not changed at all. It was as if they would never reach their destination. However, at this moment, there was a sudden surge of the light of Buddha that rippled over the sea, and the golden surface of the sea was suddenly tossed with waves. Then, several figures of Buddha floated up from the golden sea, standing in front of them. Their hands were clasped together in front of them, and the sound of Buddha came out of their mouths. Amitabha. Likewise, Hua Qingqing put her hands together and bowed to salute the Buddhas who were present. Finally, Yi Futian stopped cultivating as he opened his eyes, clasping his hands in front of him, and saluted, "Youngster Yi Futian comes to visit the spirit mountain of the Western Heaven. You two benefactors are both endowed with roots of wisdom," another Buddha said. Then among them, the water mist surged from the golden sea, turning into a golden door, which illuminated another world inside, as if it was the grand view of the spirit mountain. "Thank you, Grandmaster." Yi Futian bowed again to thank them. Then, the Buddha boat continued moving forward and drifting towards the door. Soon, the Buddha boat went through the door and drove inside. In the next moment, it disappeared. When they disappeared, the door disappeared immediately as well. All the phantoms of the Buddhas turned into a watery mist and returned to the sea. Everything was as it was before, as if nothing had ever happened. However, in another place, when Yi Futian and Hua Qingqing reappeared once again, there was no more Buddha boat under them. They were standing on pure soil now. Looking forward, they saw a sky full of Buddhas as the light of Buddha shone upon them. From bottom to top, many Buddhas could be seen standing in this space. When they beheld the sight before them, Yi Futian and Hua Qingqing were both very solemn. They put their hands together and greeted all the Buddhas in the sky, appearing extremely pious. The Buddhas seemed to know that they were coming, and they seemed to be waiting for them. Countless eyes fell on the two of them. Under the brilliance of the light of Buddha, both Yi Futian and Hua Qingqing felt an invisible sense of pressure. This was not deliberate, however. Whoever faced so many Buddhas in the sky at once would feel the pressure just like they did. Chapter 2475, Dharma of the Alakanatha Battle Form. Yi Futian looked at all the Buddhas in the sky. Although he felt the pressure distinctly, he would still face it with the utmost tranquility. In Spirit Mountain of Western Heaven, all the Buddhas in the sky, from the bottom up, were organized with an obvious hierarchy. Those Buddhas with stronger cultivation were sitting in higher places. It seemed that there were several layers of heavens. This was something that Yi Futian took notice of. Everything in the world had its own order. The same held true for even the Buddhas. Yi Futian, you had killed disciples of Buddhism. How dare you show your face in Spirit Mountain of Western Heaven? There was a voice that came from above, chastising him. A pressure of might now spread towards Yi Futian as many eyes fell on him. Many of them were obviously hostile. They never imagined that Yi Futian would dare to come here and step on the ultimate holy land of Western Heaven. Yi Futian looked around at the Buddhas. His expression was calm enough. He asked, "May I ask the Buddhas this? What if someone was trying to take your cultivation, robbing you of your divine items, and threatening your life? What would you do?" No one answered him, but they knew why he asked. Everything that happened previously in Six Desires Heaven was because those cultivators had attempted to take the divine body away from him. I ask the Buddhas humbly, would people who act like this be worthy of being called Buddhas? Yi Futian followed up with yet another question. On the Spirit Mountain of Western Heaven, there was a moment of silence. Then a great Buddha responded, "Not worthy. In that case, I haven't slain any Buddha. These claims are nothing more than baseless, false accusations." Yi Futian clasped his hands together and continued, "Yi Futian came here today, seeking an audience with the Lord of all Buddhas." As the Buddhas whispered amongst themselves, many Buddhist cultivators glanced at Hua Qingqing, who stood behind Yi Futian. They could discern that there was something extraordinary about her. However, for Yi Futian to take her here to see the Lord of all Buddhas was clearly a bit self-aggrandizing on Yi Futian's part. Of course, they also knew that Yi Futian came here this time because he wanted to emulate Donghuang. "Yi Futian, you came from Divine Prefecture and have only been in the Western Heaven for a few months. For what reason do you think you deserve an audience with the Lord of all Buddhas?" a Buddha asked. Some people even jeered in their hearts. This guy had not a clue of his own ability nor its limits. Buddha says that all beings are equal, and there is no distinction of high and low. I am here sincerely asking for an audience. Why is that forbidden? Yi Futian asked in return. All beings are equal, and there is no distinction between high and low. However, there is a distinction between high and low in Buddhist methods, someone replied. Yi Futian, the All Buddhas Conference is a time when all Buddhists gather to study the methods with each other. We know that you meant to emulate the feat of Donghuang the Great, but you have only cultivated in Buddhist methods for mere months. It's still a long way away from when you can compete using Buddhist methods. Furthermore, even if you are outstanding in Buddhist methods, it is no guarantee whether the Lord of all Buddhas wishes to grant you an audience. All beings are indeed equal. It is precisely because of this that all beings have no obligation to agree to any demands from the others. Yi Futian nodded slightly and said, I understand it is completely up to the Lord of all Buddhas to decide whether he will receive me or not. Although I have only cultivated Buddhist methods for a short time, I know that the cultivation does not lie in the length of time. I have no intention to follow in the footsteps of Donghuang the Great. I am only here because I desire an audience with the Lord of all Buddhas. Since this is the only opportunity available to me, that is why I am here. As he was speaking, he took a few steps forward and said, therefore, Yi Futian would like to exchange Buddhist methods with the Buddhas who are in attendance. Please advise. He put his hands together once again and bowed to salute them. He appeared to be very respectful. However, he was neither obsequious nor arrogant when facing all these Buddhas in the sky. He was extremely calm and confident. Upon the Spirit Mountain, Buddha's peaceful and benevolent light covered this space, making it more holy than ever. The Buddhas looked at the man with white hair, and they were a little curious. Hundreds of years ago, another cultivator came from Divine Prefecture to exchange with the Buddhas. What would be the difference between this one and Donghuang the Great from once upon a time? Since Benefactor Yi wants to have an exchange in Buddhist methods, who is willing to give it a try? Said a great Buddha at the highest place of Spirit Mountain, clearly granting Yi Futian's request. Yi Futian looked over there and saw that the speaker was none other than Wutian Buddha Lord himself, and he felt a little relieved. His uninvited presence at Spirit Mountain of Western Heaven was truly a bit disrespectful. The worst-case scenario was he being forcibly driven out of Spirit Mountain. If that happened, it would definitely be impossible for him to see the Lord of all Buddhas. The words of Wutian Buddha Lord, no doubt, gave him a fighting chance. All the Buddhas in the sky fixed their eyes on Yi Futian. They could perceive Yi Futian's cultivation at the peak of Renhuang in the 8th realm. And they had long heard of Yi Futian's combat effectiveness. When he was in the original realm, they had already heard that Yi Futian was an invincible existence in the Renhuang realm. With the help of the divine body, he could punish even those who had survived the divine tribulation of the Great Path. Of course, Yi Futian couldn't leverage the divine body or any other objects at present. He had only the option to fight using Buddhist methods. And Yi Futian had only cultivated the Buddhist methods for a few months. It was in this context that the Buddhas had taken Yi Futian's cultivation into consideration. At this moment, a Buddha came forward. His entire body was brilliant and massive, it was as if cast from pure gold. His cultivation was exceptional Buddhist path 9th realm, which was equivalent to peak Renhuang. This is Giant Spirit Buddha, Wutian Buddha Lord introduced. Giant Spirit Buddha bowed with his hands together in front of him, and said to Yi Futian, Benefactor Yi, pleased to meet you. Yi Futian looked at Giant Spirit Buddha, who was several heads taller than himself. His hands clasped in front of him, and he was surrounded by golden light. He sat down cross-legged and said, there is a mention in Buddhist scriptures that as long as the Buddha's heart is determined and faithful, it cannot be shaken, and that a Kalanatha battle form could be achieved. Is that correct? It seems that Benefactor Yi has indeed paid attention in the cultivation of Buddhist methods, praised the Giant Spirit Buddha. If so, please go ahead. When Yi Futian finished speaking, he, who was sitting cross-legged, closed his eyes. His heart was as steady and indestructible a rock. His entire body was shining with golden divine light, and a humongous Buddha statue appeared now, turning into the Dharma of a Kalanatha battle form. Both of its hands were held in different positions. It was as if his thoughts had been proven and had turned him into a Buddha. This sight truly astonished the many Buddhas on the Spirit Mountain, and the Giant Spirit Buddha was no exception. However, his body began to expand and enlarge. It turned into a Buddha, which was about the same size as the Alakanatha battle form, but even more stalwart and full of power. The expanded version of Giant Spirit Buddha was holding a Vajra pestle radiated with the light of Buddha. He picked it up overhead with both his hands and smashed directly towards the Alakanatha Buddha form. However, Yi Futian remained motionless, his eyes closed. His inaction caused many people to sweat for him. When the Vajra pestle blasted down, a violent roar was heard, and the Alakanatha battle form shook because of it. But its golden torso did not suffer the slightest crack, and it remained as immovable as a mountain, true to the meaning of indestructibility. The golden light of Buddha circulated above the Dharma of the Akalanatha battle form. It was as if many Buddhist runes were floating around, making him a true incarnation of the Buddha. When he saw this, the giant spirit Buddha knew that he had lost. He put down the Vajra pestle and put his hands together to bow to Yi Futian. Just as benefactor Yi said, the cultivation of Buddhism does not depend on the length of time spent in cultivation. For you to achieve the Akalanatha battle form in just a few months and comprehend the truth therewithin, I dare say benefactor Yi is indeed predestined with my Lord Buddha. Little monk, I am ashamed that I am not fit to compete. After that, the giant spirit Buddha stepped back out of his own volition. Yi Futian came to the spirit mountain of the Western Heaven to exchange Buddhist methods, and in just one battle, he had demonstrated his attainments in Buddhist methods to all the Buddhas in the Western Heaven. Chapter 2476, Buddhist Spell. Benefactor Yi has already acquired the essence of a Akalanatha battle form. It seems that he accomplished much in these past few months of cultivation. Nobody should underestimate him, a great Buddha commented as he looked at Yi Futian, who was below. The Dharma of a Akalanatha battle form was also known as a Akalanatha battle form, a very powerful battle form in Buddhism. The cultivation of this battle form was extremely demanding regarding one's state of mind. No one ever suspected that Yi Futian would fully comprehend and cultivate this technique in such a short period. In another direction, many Buddhist cultivators looked at each other. Shenyang Arhat was among these cultivators. Not long ago, they discussed that Yi Futian had only cultivated Buddhism for months and did not stay long in the many places he visited. He would go to some ancient temple for 2 or 3 days before moving on to another one. They did not think this was the way for anyone to cultivate Buddhism properly. But obviously, they were wrong. They had underestimated Yi Futian's talent in Buddhism. Not only did he successfully cultivated Buddhist methods, but he had also achieved great things. Although the giant spirit Buddha was not some major Buddhist figure, he was, after all, an existence in the 9th realm of the Buddhist path. Nevertheless, he was unable to break apart Yi Futian's battle form. The gap between the two was glaring. This demonstrated that Yi Futian's strength was so considerable that unless it were top-level Buddhist cultivators, it would not be easy to repel him. Yi Futian opened his eyes and looked at all the Buddhas. He then walked forward with a solemn expression, hands clasped together in front of him. He maintained a grave and dignified demeanor without being the least impertinent. His lips moved slightly, and sounds of Buddha seemed to come out of his mouth. It was rather difficult to hear what he was saying, only the lingering sound of Buddha was audible. He walked forward as if he intended to get to the highest point on a whim. This was to meet the greatest Buddhas of them all, the Lord of all Buddhas. Those great Buddhas felt a sense of déjà vu when they beheld this sight. Hundreds of years ago, Donghuang the Great, like him, walked all the way up to the top and had met the Lord of all Buddhas. Yi Futian, likewise, was also from the divine prefecture. Bang! Another great Buddha stepped out at this time. This great Buddha was a Buddhist cultivator under Tianluan Vajra Buddha Lord. He had an amazing aura that gave the onlookers a sense of incredible pressure of aggression. When he was standing in front of Yi Futian, a golden Dharma appeared behind him, as a domain suddenly manifested between heaven and earth with Yi Futian in the middle of it. Height above the sky, numerous glaring Vajra Buddhas appeared, pressing down with mighty coercion. These glaring Vajras were fierce and frightening, with terrifying auras. The Buddha that had walked out also transformed into a Vajra Buddha himself. As he stretched out his golden right arm, suddenly, those glaring Vajras also stretched out their arms, blasting towards Yi Futian at the same time. However, a series of ancient, golden words continued to pour out of Yi Futian's lips, as the sounds of Buddha lingered. That Buddhist cultivator who walked out had a look of caution on his face. This was a Buddhist spell. Did he actually cultivate the Buddhist spell? All around Yi Futian, powerful and domineering Vajras holding the Dharma, spewing out mantras as an unparalleled golden light of Buddha radiated from them. When those many arms blasted down for the kill, they found they could not move him 1 inch. At the same time, with the sound of Buddha that poured out of Yi Futian's mouth, Many of those Buddha phantoms in the void began to crack, then they shattered. A Buddhist mantra in the form of runes landed on them, causing their golden body to collapse and pulverize. Aside from those Buddha phantoms, the Buddhist cultivator that had walked out suffered, too. Countless runes of Buddhist mantra attached themselves to his golden body and erupted in golden divine light. The light of Buddha was blinding as his golden body exploded. He let out an enraged scream, trying to escape the runes of mantra. However, the runes were endless and infinite, completely shrouding the void. Along with those roaring sounds, the golden body shattered, and that Buddhist cultivator was knocked out. He gave a muffled groan as blood dripped from the corner of his mouth. His golden body was broken, and he was injured. Futian bowed his head and said nothing. He clasped his hands together in front of them and continued moving forward. When that Buddhist cultivator saw Futian coming, he involuntarily backed away to let Futian walk past him. Vajra spell. All the Buddhas looked at Futian in amazement. In addition to the Alakanatha battle form, Futian had also cultivated the Vajra spell, a Buddhist spell. There were many powerful spells in Buddhism that were extremely effective. There were even spells that could transcend the dead and send them into the cycles of reincarnation. The spell Futian used just now was the Vajra spell, which was a particularly domineering type of spell. It was a perfect complement with the Alakanatha battle form, and together, they formed a powerful and unstoppable duo. It was no wonder that the Buddhist cultivator had been unable to stop him from advancing. It was pure coincidence when Futian first cultivated this spell. He had already cultivated the Vajra demon-slaying rhythm previously, which was a rhythm technique of Buddhism. It turned out that Vajra demon-slaying rhythm was derived from the Vajra spell, which was also a part of the spell itself. With an existing foundation and an expert in the way of rhythm, Futian's cultivation of the Vajra spell was a natural choice. He was able to take control of it quickly, and its power was indeed domineering and tyrannical. Afterward, another Buddhist cultivator came out, still someone in the ninth realm, but there was no success. He was crushed by Futian, just like all the others before him. With the Vajra spell on top of the Alakanatha battle form, Futian was solid and unmovable. However, the others could not withstand his attacks. They couldn't even stop his advancement, as he was still walking forward. Seeing that Futian was so impossibly dominant, some Buddhist cultivators stepped forward one after another. Some wanted to stymie Futian's forward progress, and some wanted to experience Futian's strength. But all of them, without exception, were not able to stop him. On both sides, there was a collection of quite a few wounded cultivators. However, Futian was merciful. He didn't go overboard and hurt anyone grievously, as all of them were only slightly injured. After all, this was the spirit mountain of the Western Heaven, the supreme holy land of the world of Buddhism, the place where the Lord of all Buddhas once cultivated. Soon, Futian passed through the lowest layer and stepped up onto the golden sea of clouds. All around him, the auras of these Buddhist cultivators were becoming stronger, as their statuses were also elevated. Just as that great Buddha said before, all beings were equal, and there was no difference among Buddhas. However, there was a distinction between Buddhist methods. From the highest point, those Buddha lords watched Futian making his way up towards them. Some Buddha lords whispered, "I didn't expect that someone from the divine prefecture, after having cultivated Buddhism for a few months, could reach this level of achievement. It seems that unless the direct disciples of the Buddha lords intervene, it will be difficult to stop benefactor Yi. Could it be that the Buddhas cultivated the methods for many years and are still not as good as the few months someone spent in cultivation?" Other great Buddhas looked around the crowd and questioned. This great Buddha was none other than Shenyang Buddha Lord, whose speech was as belligerent. His gaze was frightening. Zhu Hu, who was killed in Jianan City, was a disciple of his. Of course, there were many disciples under him, and the death of one was hardly a great matter to him. As someone who was a Buddha Lord, he didn't need to deal with the nitty-gritty of these matters. Nonetheless, it was his disciple who had died, and now the culprit had come here, crashing through the spirit mountain of the Western Heaven. He was certainly unhappy about this turn of events. If this man were allowed to pass through Spirit Mountain, wouldn't it be a slap in the face for the Buddhas who were here? All the Buddhas cultivated the same methods, But Buddhism was infinite, and the way it was cultivated by each person was different as well. It was the same with figures such as the Buddha lords. Their ideals and philosophies differed depending on who they were. Upon hearing the words of Shenyang Buddha Lord, one of his disciples immediately came forward. He was still a cultivator in the ninth realm with a terrifying aura of cultivation. He stood in front of Yi Futian, opened up his heavenly eyes, and looked at Yi Futian. It was as if he could see through Yi Futian. Yi Futian raised his head to glance at the other man and thought, a disciple of Shenyang Buddha Lord? Previously, these people had stopped him in the sacred land of the Western Heaven. If they were not on a killing hiatus because of the All Buddhas Fest, perhaps they would be seeking revenge for Zhu by now. Chapter 2477, Mahavirokana. Her. The cultivator who came forward was under the tutelage of Shenyang Buddha Lord. He frowned when he used his heavenly eyes to examine Yi Futian. Buddha's clairvoyance was one of the 6 superpowers of Buddhism, infinitely wondrous. Buddha's clairvoyance could see through all things and everything. When cultivated to its ultimate state, it could see into someone's past and future. It was true that Yi Futian had released the Dharma, but his realm was higher than that of Yi Futian's. Using the Buddha's clairvoyance, he should be able to detect all of Yi Futian's weaknesses, unhindered by the Dharma. He would then see through the essence of Yi Futian, thus defeating him using the most effective superpower. However, the Buddha's clairvoyance revealed nothing but primordial chaos. He was unable to see anything clearly, as if in a state of complete nothingness. He even had a suspicious feeling that Yi Futian was like the real Buddha, the purest Buddhist cultivator whose body was cast in gold. Under the blessing of the Dharma, he was solemn and sacred. This was usually what happened when he looked into other great Buddhas with clairvoyance. Why did this happen when he looked at Yi Futian? He's a little odd. Not only him, but his fellow disciples were all looking at Yi Futian at this time, golden light of Buddhas shining from their eyes. They used the heavenly eyes to pry and spy. However, even as close as they were, their efforts were equally futile as they could not properly comprehend his depth. It gave them an illusion that Buddha's clairvoyance had absolutely no effect on Yi Futian. Indeed, perhaps he has divine items or some blessings on him that could resist the prying eyes of Buddha's clairvoyance, the people next to him suggested. If Buddha's clairvoyance was unable to see through Yi Futian, then the only way to deal with Yi Futian was by real combat, which would not be easy, to put it mildly. After all, Yi Futian had demonstrated extraordinary combat effectiveness when he fought before, consistently crushing Buddhist cultivators in the ninth realm. However, the person who came forward was their fellow disciples, cultivating under the same master, Shenyang Buddha Lord. Even if he couldn't pry or see through Yi Futian, his cultivation in Buddhist methods ought to be on equal ground for him to compete with Yi Futian. That Buddhist cultivator's expression sobered up quite a bit now. With a thought, this space suddenly transformed into a realm of Buddhism. Behind him, a Tianyang Buddha appeared. At the same time, countless pairs of eyes appeared in the surrounding space. The sight was a little eerie. Those many eyes looked in Yi Futian's direction simultaneously. When Yi Futian looked at those eyes, countless images appeared in his mind, like illusions. Each pair of eyes contained a different phantasmatic image, which directly took Yi Futian into what seemed to be the world of eye sorcery. Yi Futian found that he seemed to have entered into another world, the space of eye sorcery, the world of the Buddhas. Obviously, he knew this was a false illusion, but somehow, he was still taken there regardless of that knowledge. However, he did not waver. Sounds of Sanskrit came out of his mouth as the Alakanatha battle form released a brilliant light of Buddha behind him. The light of Buddha surrounded him and expelled all deceptions. Numerous pairs of heavenly eyes were still suspended in the air, but he stood his ground and did not move. All illusions were emptiness. Buzz. At the same time, the golden light of Buddha radiated out of the heavenly eyes which descended upon Yi Futian. Suddenly, Yi Futian felt his body was being restrained. It was difficult for him to move, he couldn't even lift his feet. Buddhist runes continuously flew out of his mouth, flying towards those many pairs of eyes in the void. The Alakanatha battle form released an even more brilliant light of Buddha. Yi Futian remained still. That Buddhist cultivator raised his hand, and a golden divine sword appeared in the hand of the Tianyang Buddha who was behind him. This sword was blessed by the light of Buddha, and it seemed to be able to cut down all falsehoods and immolate all evil spirits. At the same time, there seemed to be images of Buddhas that reflected in those heavenly eyes. They made the same movement as the Buddha, who slashed down with the divine sword, heaving it into Yi Futian's body. Immobilization technique, Zhuxie sword. When all the Buddhist cultivators witnessed the sight, they recognized these two powerful Buddhist superpowers. He had leveraged the heavenly eyes to release the immobilization technique and Zhuxie sword to create a combination so powerful that they could break through all the falsehoods and punish the physical body directly. No evil spirits could stop the attacks from the divine sword. Yi Futian had spent several months comprehending Buddhism in the ancient temples of the Western Heaven. Although it was impossible for him to cultivate all of Buddhism's superpowers, he had some basic understanding of many Buddhist methods. He clearly recognized the immobilization technique and Zhuxie sword. The combination and complementarity of the two Buddhist superpowers were indeed unparalleled and astounding. What would happen when the Alakanatha battle form encountered the Zhuxie sword? The light of Buddha on Yi Futian's body was dazzling incessantly. The Vajra spell was spat out from him and landed on those pairs of heavenly eyes. However, the Zhuxie sword had already smashed down and blasted on the battle form. Suddenly, cracks in the Alakanatha battle form appeared. At the same time, the body began to fall apart, and the Vajra spell struck many heavenly eyes, destroying them completely. The Zhuxie sword smashed down, and just it was about to make contact with Yi Futian's body, another blazing light of Buddha bloomed. The golden light overwhelmed the sky with indescribable radiance. A Buddha rose up, pushing the Zhuxie sword upward in the opposite direction. A golden sun appeared above the firmament. Yi Futian seemed to have incarnated into an ancient Buddha, whose brilliance was shining through the ages. A golden divine flame was burning upon the Buddha's body. So fervent and strong was it that the Zhuxie sword began to catch on fire and started burning. Little by little, it was being destroyed. Mahavairokkana. All the Buddhas were a little taken aback by what they were seeing. Yi Futian had previously displayed two powerful Buddhist superpowers, the Alakanatha battle forms and the Vajra spell. Now, he was unleashing a third Buddhist superpower, the Mahavairokkana. How did he achieve that? The Mahavairokkana Buddha was a Dharmakaya. The Mahavairokkana was considered one of the strongest Dharmakayas in Buddhism. Even many of the top great Buddhas in Buddhism found it challenging to cultivate. It required total mastery of Buddhist methods in order to comprehend a thing or two about it. How could Yi Futian be capable of cultivating the Mahavairokkana? It's not right. There is no Mahavairokkana cultivation in any of the ancient temples. All that was there were just a few simple introductions. So, how did he cultivate it? Unless he did not just start cultivating Buddhist methods in the past few months, but had started cultivating it a long time ago? Some Buddhist cultivators questioned this remarkable event. Mahavairokkana is one of the most powerful Dharmakayas of Buddhism. It was never passed on to outsiders. How did he cultivate it? Where did he steal it from? Someone else questioned in an accusatory tone. Buddha Lord, this young man's intention is highly suspect. His cultivation should be abolished. Someone looked at the great Buddhas high above and suggested. Just as they were talking amongst themselves, the Mahavairokkana was still expanding, burning the Zhuxie sword to a crisp, breaking through the immobilization technique and all those pairs of heavenly eyes. A thunderous rumbling sound came out, and the boundless and massive Mahavairokkana raised his palm and slammed it forward. When it was unleashed, it was obvious that it was none other than the palm of Mahavairokkana. The Buddhist cultivator summoned the Dharmakaya to contend, but the terrifying palm of Mahavairokkana blasted down, shattering everything. There was a loud bang as cracks appeared on the ground. That Buddhist cultivator grunted as if he was about to be crushed. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and his golden body broken into pieces. Bang! With a loud boom, the palm of Mahavairokkana smashed the golden body into pieces, leaving a terrible giant palm print on the ground, and it then dissipated and disappeared. However, that Buddhist cultivator was now breathing shallowly as blood came out of the corners of his mouth. He looked extremely weak. He had clearly lost the ability to fight again. When they looked at Yi Futian once more, they saw the light of Buddha shine brightly on the vast space, and the Mahavairokkana radiated infinitely rays of light. It was as if Yi Futian had already proved himself as a Buddha. At this moment, Yi Futian was like the true Buddha. Chapter 2478, The Threat. Mahavairokkana. The Buddhist cultivator who was defeated by Yi Futian just stared at him. He had cultivated Buddhist methods for many years under Shenyang Buddha Lord. He had followed him all these years and had the opportunity to be preached and taught by the Buddha Lord himself. However, even so, some of the most profound Buddhist methods were still difficult to cultivate. This Mahavairokkana was considered a top-level Buddhist method and was known as one of the strongest and most superior Dharmakayas in Buddhism. The Mahavairokkana Buddha was a Dharmakaya Buddha who once achieved in the cultivation of this Dharma, attained the Dharmakaya, and was incarnated as the Mahavairokkana. It was extremely virile in nature and powerful beyond description. Incorruptible by any means, it was capable of overcoming all evil spirits. But this superior method that he was unable to cultivate, Yi Futian did. This cultivator from the divine prefecture had only been in contact with Buddhism for a few months. When did you cultivate the Mahavairokkana? That Buddhist cultivator's eyes were solemn and grave, and he had quite forgotten about his own injury. The shock in his heart was stronger. It far surpassed the impact that physical injuries had imposed on him. Yi Futian did not respond. He put his hands together in front of him, looking at the great Buddha high above the spirit mountain, and said, "The Lord of all Buddhas preached Buddhism throughout the world. The hope is so that everyone in the world would be able to understand the mystery of Buddhism. Therefore, why is my cultivation of the Mahavairokkana considered a sin? It ought to be regarded as my destiny with Buddhism." Amitabha, Wutian Buddha said with his hands together. Yi Futian's words are true enough. Buddhism spreads throughout the world. If he is able to cultivate it, then it is his destiny in Buddhism. Not to mention that his cultivation of it was complete. If anyone accused him of stealing while all the Buddha lords are still around, this statement would sound a little too far-fetched and absurd. All Buddhist superpowers were infinitely wondrous. How could Yi Futian learn of such superior Buddhist methods in secret? If he really did, they should have known easily enough. Even so, how did he cultivate this Mahavairokkana? Shenyang Buddha Lord asked. He had always been somewhat hostile towards Yi Futian. Of course, this did not mean that he regarded Yi Futian as an enemy. In his eyes, Yi Futian was but a youngster who had relied on sneaky means to cause the demise of several lord-level figures. He had used the explosion of the divine body to injure Saint Xunchan severely. None of these happenings were based on Yi Futian's own strength. As a great Buddha in the world of Buddhism, why would he even care about an insignificant youngster like Yi Futian? But he disapproved of the way he behaved. If I told you that when I was cultivating Buddhism, a Buddha had instructed me in Buddhist methods, thus aiding me in the cultivation of the Mahavairokkana, would the Buddha Lord believe me? Yi Futian said. That's absurd. Shenyang Buddha Lord stared at Yi Futian. He asked, "Which great Buddha taught methods to you?" As Buddha said, "Silence is the word," Yi Futian responded, which was reciprocated by a cold snort from Shenyang Buddha Lord. Suddenly, a coercion descended on Yi Futian across the space, from top to bottom, oppressing him completely. "Today, I came here humbly seeking Buddhist methods. Does the Buddha Lord wish to come out himself and demonstrate?" Yi Futian asked. He had only the cultivation of Ren Huang in the 8th realm and had not been cultivated in Buddhist methods for long. If a Buddha as respectable as Shenyang Buddha Lord himself were to engage him in battle, then it would very clearly be a case of an unfair fight. Under the circumstance, how could they continue to discuss or exchange Buddhist methods? That would be a blatant act of bullying. With all the Buddhas gathered at one place here currently, Shenyang Buddha Lord couldn't very well act as he wanted. Therefore, he simply snorted and said, "Although you cultivate in Buddhism, it was no more than the form itself. You relied heavily on your own natural talent and cultivated Buddhist superpowers in a hurry. Your cultivation was not rooted in the essence of Buddhism at all. I want to see just how far you can go with this." What the Buddha Lord said was true enough. Just because someone had cultivated Buddhist superpowers does not mean that they are Buddhas themselves, said another Buddhist cultivator. Yi Futian clasped his hands together in front of him and nodded serious, saying, "What the Buddha Lord said was quite true. I am just a beginner in cultivating Buddhism, and I can feel the depth and profundity of Buddhism. Even a lifetime may not be enough to become a Buddha in the truest sense. To cultivate in Buddhism is to cultivate one's heart, and I readily admit that I am far from achieving that just yet. In my heart, there is only awe for all Buddhist methods. This world is vast, and countless people had touted themselves as Buddhas. However, how many among them can really truly deserve to be called as such?" "Insolent," someone reprimanded from the sky above, which shocked some of the cultivators who heard it. Obviously, they had heard the impertinence in Yi Futian's remark, and he was quite brazen in the way he spoke to them. What he was really trying to convey was that in a world as vast as this, with countless people calling themselves Buddhas, how many of them could truly be considered Buddhas? In front of him, on this spirit mountain of the Western heaven, there were Buddhas as far as the eyes could see. All of them prided themselves on their status as Buddhas. Weren't they the ones that Yi Futian was referring to? Yi Futian raised his head to look at the person who was giving the lecture and replied, "What I said was consistent with the spirit of the lecture given by the Buddha Lord." What was wrong with that? Shenyang Buddha Lord had claimed that he had merely cultivated superpowers of Buddhism and never really came into contact with the Buddha. What Yi Futian said was simply an extension of what had been said by Shenyang Buddha Lord. The great Buddha reprimanding him simply stared at Yi Futian, and he was not the only one. Many other Buddhist cultivators were looking at Yi Futian coldly as well. On this spirit mountain of Western heaven, Yi Futian dared to make such an outrageous statement. It wasn't just one or two people that he offended, but he was referring to all the Buddhas. However, one couldn't really say that what Yi Futian had said was false. If another Buddhist cultivator were to jump out and accuse him, wouldn't it be a confession of sorts, saying that they didn't think they were worthy of the title of Buddha? "We have heard that while you were still in the divine prefecture, Benefactor Yi offended various forces there and cultivators from every major world, therefore, you ended up with nowhere to go. Now that we have personally experienced it, truly, seeing is believing," a Buddha said with a smile on his face. His true intention was hard to detect. "Ever since I first came to the Western world of Buddhism, I have been plotted against and hunted down to be controlled from the very beginning. Could it be that as soon as I arrived, I had already offended the cultivators of this world?" Yi Futian responded. "It is said that there are also Buddhist cultivators among these people. I wonder if this is the reason why all you elders detested me so." "Benefactor Yi was overly sensitive about my words," the laughing Buddha said with a smile but did not continue to say anything more. Yi Futian surveyed the Buddhas around him. Before he came here today, he had already offended some of them. He really didn't care if he offended a few more. However, he needed to leave before the end of the All Buddhas Fest. Of course, if he could meet with the Lord of all Buddhas, that would be another matter entirely. Of course, the most important matter at the moment was still to continue testing their skills in Buddhist methods. Yi Futian continued to move forward with the light of Buddha from the Mahavairokkana. He said, "I have just been exposed recently to Buddhism, and my methods are just average. I want to learn from other Buddhist cultivators who have much higher attainment in Buddhism than myself." When Yi Futian spoke, he glanced in the direction where Shenyang Buddha Lord was. The implication was evident. Since he had suggested Yi Futian's cultivation in Buddhist methods was lowly and not worthy, Yi Futian meant to goad him into dispatching some accomplished and learned disciples under him for a challenge. Many Buddhist cultivators now looked at Shenyang Arhat. Among the disciples under Shenyang Buddha Lord, Shenyang Arhat was the most outstanding. Yi Futian came to Spirit Mountain today and displayed his extraordinary talents. Although he had only been cultivating the Buddhist methods for several months, he had comprehended a variety of superb Buddhist superpowers, including the Mahavairokkana. In many people's eyes, Yi Futian wanted to follow in the steps of Donghuang the Great, which was tantamount to some idiotic dream, nothing more than inviting more shame onto himself. Many, including the likes of Shenyang Arhat, believed that they could easily crush Yi Futian and kick him off Spirit Mountain. But at this moment, they truly sensed a faint hint of threat. Yi Futian really seemed to possess the strength to contend with all the Buddhas in his presence. Chapter 2479, Sweep. Shenyang Arhat did not step forward. In the Western heaven, there were many Buddhas, and Shenyang Buddha Lord was one of the Buddhas who stood at the peak of the realm. Shenyang Arhat was the chosen successor of Shenyang Buddha Lord. He represented Shenyang Buddha Lord as his most outstanding disciple. Here on Spirit Mountain, he was also the most prominent Buddha of his generation. He was situated at the top of the upper heavens of Spirit Mountain. His standing was apparent from this. Although Yi Futian already posed a threat to his ability, Yi Futian still had to make his way past many Buddhist cultivators to get here. For now, Shenyang Arhat did not need to act. However, Yi Futian was not bothered with who would attack him. The Mahavirocana battle form still remained. He walked up slowly into the sky. He was not moving fast, but each step he took was stable and firm. It made people feel as though he was as solid and unmovable as a boulder. A Buddhist cultivator stepped forward. He was at the peak of the 9th tier of the Buddhist path. Now, only Buddhist cultivators at this level could contend with Yi Futian in Buddhist doctrine. Right out of the gate, a 9th tier cultivator came to fight him. Among 8th tier Buddhist cultivators, only Arhat level figures had the chance of going against Yi Futian. "I wish to experience benefactor Yi's Buddhist doctrine firsthand," said the monk who emerged. He stood in the sky above Yi Futian and was an older Buddhist cultivator. He had immersed himself in the 9th tier of the Buddhist path for many years. He had high attainments in terms of Buddhist doctrine. It was just that he had yet to break through the shackles of the path and experience Buddha's tribulation. "Master, please do not hesitate to give me some pointers," replied Yi Futian politely as he placed his palms together. As he said this, the unparalleled golden light of Buddha radiated from the other party's floating figure. The silhouette of a bodhisattva appeared. It was sitting cross-legged on a golden lotus and reciting mantras. Immediately, endless mantras reverberated in the space. It was as though various silhouettes of Buddhas appeared at the same time in the sky. The mantras circled around Yi Futian and echoed throughout the space. In an instant, it enveloped the top of Spirit Mountain. It was a Buddhist spell. Yi Futian instantly sensed this. Not only did he sense it, but he was even brought into a different space. Inside the space, he saw the dazzling silhouettes of golden Buddhas. They appeared divine. Before the Buddhas, a mirror with many images appeared. The images were, surprisingly, of his life. They were all the things that he had done. Most of them showed massacres. For instance, one image was of the death of Lord Six Desires and Great Elder Mortian. After they died, the misery faced by their loved ones surfaced. Their fortunes were liquidated, and their fates were miserable. Aside from that, all the cultivators killed by Yi Futian across his decades of cultivation also appeared. He even caught a glimpse of the moment they perished as well as the anguish of their loved ones. These were all illusions. This thought surfaced in Yi Futian's mind. However, he found it difficult to struggle free from this illusion. He still remained in this space. This was no mere illusion but a fantasy woven by the Buddhist spell. They were real and yet also ethereal. They were all the outcomes of Yi Futian's actions. Behind the images, the Buddhas seemed to be overflowing with compassion and mercy, as though they were advising the viewer to let go of their hatred and resolve. This caused Yi Futian's heart to turn mellow and caused him to reflect on all he had done. He began to doubt his own actions and challenge his own beliefs. Suddenly, an intense sense of realization welled up in Yi Futian's heart. In order to achieve greater cultivation, one must cultivate their own heart. The spell might make him disagree with all that he had done and even deny his former self. If Yi Futian's state of mind were affected by the corrosion of this spell, then his status would surely affect his comprehension of Buddhist doctrine and his future cultivation. This monk harbored ill intentions. Or it should be said that this spell was too terrifying. Yi Futian started chanting Vajra spell. A golden ray enveloped his body like a robe, fortifying his state of mind and allowing him to be able to stare directly at the images. Yi Futian, you have claimed countless lives throughout your journey. Your sin is great. You shall reap what you sow, a voice reverberated in Yi Futian's mind, causing even his spiritual soul to tremble. However, Yi Futian managed to stare calmly at the other party. Not only could Vajra spell be used as an attack, but it could also serve to fortify one's state of mind. The journey of a cultivator was destined to be established on the dead bodies of countless other cultivators. This was especially true for someone like Yi Futian, who had come all the way here from the 9 states of the lower worlds. This Buddhist cultivator before him knew nothing of his struggles, so the Buddhist cultivator was not qualified to assume the role of the merciful one and convict him as a great sinner. Was it considered a sin for him to kill Great Elder Mortian and Lord Six Desire? At that moment, Yi Futian gained the upper hand in his mental war against the Buddhist spell, allowing him to be even more resolute. There were very few things that Yi Futian regretted in his life. He did everything with a clear conscience. If there is karma, I am willing to accept the karma for all my actions, said Yi Futian nonchalantly. The flaming golden light of Buddha burst forth from his body. The light of Mahavarokana was dazzling. Then, a terrifying palm of Mahavarokana charged out and immediately shattered the images and reduced them to dust. The palm of Mahavarokana lit up the space. It crashed into the other party's body. The outcome was the same as before. His opponent was immediately injured and spat out fresh blood. Bang! Yi Futian did not stop moving at all and continued to advance. His footsteps were firm, as though his faith was even more resolute at this moment. No one could stop him. Amitabha, another Buddha, stepped forward. The light of Buddha radiated, and he unleashed his Buddhist battle form, causing the figure of an ancient Buddha to appear. Yi Futian looked up. This time, he did not bother making any small talk. He immediately sent a palm of Mahavarokana crashing forward and smashing the space. It charged straight towards the Buddhist cultivator and did not give the other party any opportunity to unleash any Buddhist doctrine. Since they were comparing their Buddhist doctrine, these Buddhas should first display an ability on par with Yi Futian's to qualify to have a conversation with him. Otherwise, if they took their sweet time, how long would he need to reach the very top and meet the Lord of all Buddhas? Rumble. A loud sound could be heard again. After experiencing the Buddhist spell and doubting himself, he was actually even stronger now. It was as though he had undergone a true metamorphosis and become Mahavarokana. As his palm strike descended, no Buddha could stand in his way. The scene before them shocked the various Buddhas. The various Buddhas in the sky stared at the silhouette. Aside from the sound of Yi Futian's attacks and his footsteps, the spirit mountain of Western Heaven where various Buddhas gathered actually became eerily quiet as they watched Yi Futian advancing step by step. One by one, the Buddhist cultivators fell before Yi Futian. It was as though there was no Buddha who could block Yi Futian's path. Yi Futian managed to conquer many stages with only the palm of Mahavarokana and Vajra spell. A few hours later, Yi Futian had almost arrived at the peak of Spirit Mountain. Only the last few stages were left. Even the few arhats that he had met were sitting above his current stage. He was close to reaching them. These arhats would most likely attack him now. The various arhats and Buddha lords witnessed how Yi Futian made his way towards them step by step. They felt as though they were seeing another Donghuang the Great a few centuries later. Chapter 2480, Space Battle Form. There were countless Buddhas gathering at Spirit Mountain of Western Heaven. Among them were many ancient Buddhas who had years of experience. They were present when Donghuang the Great visited Spirit Mountain a few centuries ago. Even up until now, the scene remained fresh in their memories. Yi Futian was somewhat different from Donghuang the Great. The Buddhas who had experienced what happened in the past were well aware of this. In the past, even before Donghuang the Great set foot in the world of Buddhism, he actually had read countless Buddhist scriptures and had cultivated the Buddhist path. Exactly because of his involvement in Buddhism, Donghuang the Great came to Spirit Mountain of Western Heaven with the intention of seeking the Buddhist path from the Lord of all Buddhas. When Donghuang the Great came to seek pointers from Spirit Mountain, his performance was even more stunning than Yi Futian's. Not only did he fight and defeat the Buddhas using Buddhist superpowers, but he also debated with them. His comprehension of Buddhist doctrine was on par with that of many senior Buddhas. Therefore, Donghuang the Great could be considered a true, unprecedented genius. His abilities were unrivaled. Many senior Buddhas felt ashamed of their shortcomings when faced with him. Not only was Donghuang the Great well versed in all kinds of Buddhist doctrine, but he also had a profound understanding of them. This caused many Buddhas who were on Spirit Mountain of Western Heaven back then felt disgraced. Because of that, the Buddhas on Spirit Mountain of Western Heaven were divided into two factions based on their opinion of Donghuang the Great. Some of them were resentful of him because he had embarrassed them, while some of them respected and admired him. The Buddhas could still remember when the Lord of all Buddhas revealed himself and met Donghuang the Great. The first question Donghuang the Great had for him was, what was his view of the world now that he had proven his way as body? It was apparent from this that Donghuang the Great already had great ambition back then. In terms of cultivation, Futian now could not compare with Donghuang the Great centuries ago. They weren't even on the same level. However, the various Buddhas felt they were seeing another Donghuang the Great because there was something different about Futian, just like Donghuang the Great. Futian had just come in contact with the Buddhist path and joined a Buddhist sect for mere months. In such a short span of time, he had comprehended Buddhist doctrine and used Buddhist superpowers to defeat various Buddhas, dominating the battles as he advanced to the top level of Spirit Mountain. The various Buddhas saw the image of Donghuang the Great in him. Of course, there was also another area where Futian and Donghuang the Great were similar. When Donghuang the Great previously came to Spirit Mountain, no one could get a read on him, even when using Buddhist superpowers. Now, it was also the same for Futian. Clairvoyance could not pry into everything in his mind. They couldn't see through to his past or future. This made the various Buddhas feel as though these two individuals were men of destiny. They were born extraordinary and were destined for exceptional achievements. That was why clairvoyance bore no results. The various Buddha lords all wanted to get a read on Futian. However, the result was always the same, just like with Donghuang the Great back then. Futian did not know what the various Buddhas were thinking. He continued advancing upwards. Shenyang Buddha Lord was staring at Futian. Futian had actually made his way up here. Centuries ago, Donghuang the Great had already done this once before. Now, if they allowed Futian to repeat the feat, the various Buddhas of Western Heaven would be disgraced. Right then, Shenyang Arhat stood up. The light of Buddha circled around him, and immediately the gazes of the various Buddhas turned towards him. Was he finally making his move? Right now, unless Shenyang Arhat stepped forward, it was possible that no one could suppress Futian. Tongchan Arhat was also present. He was at the same level as the Shenyang Arhat. He looked down below. His enchanting gaze seemed to reveal a faint smile. When Futian first arrived in Western Heaven, the various Buddhist cultivators all knew of his arrival. Tongchan Arhat had personally gone to meet Futian. He never thought that Futian was far more talented than they had imagined. Not only had Futian stirred up a storm in Six Desires Heaven, but he had now single-handedly fought his way up Spirit Mountain. He wanted to imitate Donghuang the Great's feat and defeat the various Buddhas. Now, the Arhats had no choice but to meet Futian head-on. Shenyang Arhat floated above Futian. His pupils were terrifying as they emitted golden light of Buddha. Futian's manner was equally imposing and not at all inferior to his. With the aid of Mahavirokana, Futian managed to defeat all the Buddhist cultivators along the way and had arrived at this stage. Please give me some pointers, Futian said politely. Shenyang Arhat placed his palms together and replied, likewise. Although both sides bore animosity for each other, their conversation sounded amiable. However, once they finished their verbal exchange, the palm of Mahavirokana immediately charged forward and crushed the space. Intense rumbling could be heard as it lunged towards Shenyang Arhat. Shenyang Arhat's body still floated in midair and had not moved an inch. His light of Buddha shone brilliantly, and a gigantic illusory figure of Buddha appeared. It then transformed into an enormous ancient golden Buddha. At this very instant, it was as though all the powers in the heavens and earth were under the control of Shenyang Arhat. With his body at the center, a gigantic and boundless illusory figure of Buddha appeared on Spirit Mountain of Western Heaven. Even Yi Futian was enveloped within this illusory Buddha. In reality, the entire spirit mountain was encompassed within it. However, the cultivators could not see the illusory Buddha figure with their naked eyes since they were within it. They could only detect it with their senses. If they leaped up into the high heavens and looked down below, then only could they see the gigantic illusory Buddha figure. The palm of Mahavairokkana struck the golden shield around Shenyang Arhat's body. However, this time, unlike before, neither the golden shield shattered, nor was the cultivator hurt. This time, the golden body of Shenyang Arhat remained sturdy. No cracks appeared on it. It merely shook. On top of that, the space and the entire spirit mountain trembled violently. It was seemingly caused by the gigantic illusory Buddha. The gigantic Buddha was shaking. It was a battle form. When Yi Futian saw this scene, he knew his opponent had similarly coalesced a powerful battle form. He raised his head and looked at it. His will scanned the gigantic illusory Buddha that enveloped the space. From the looks of it, figures at the Arhat level were indeed extraordinary. The previous cultivators could not be compared to them. It is the space battle form, a Buddha commented. Shenyang Arhat cultivated the space battle form. When in battle, he is one with space. It is his to use and under his absolute control. Although Yi Futian cultivated the Mahavairokkana battle form, he may be suppressed, a Buddha added. Shenyang Arhat had cultivated Buddhist superpowers for many years. He had always been comprehending the space battle form and had cultivated it to a high level. His cultivation plane was also higher than that of Yi Futian. It was possible that he could use this battle form to suppress Yi Futian's Mahavairokkana battle form. Right at this moment, Yi Futian suddenly sensed an overbearing pressure acting on him, pinning him to his spot. He could hardly move. It was as though the entire space was pressing against him and locking him to his spot. This sensation was identical to that of the binding technique he experienced before. However, the pressure acting on Yi Futian now was even more powerful than that of the binding technique. The space seemed to be under Shenyang Arhat's absolute control. With a mere thought of his opponent, Yi Futian was trapped within the space. Rumble. From the Mahavairokkana battle form, golden light of Buddha radiated outwards and lit up the space. Terrifying rumbling sounds could be heard. The Mahavairokkana battle form was shaking, attempting to free itself from the binding technique by expanding. If he were bound to one spot, he would be at the mercy of his opponent. Humph! Yi Futian heard a cold snort. This snort was from Shenyang Arhat. He glanced at the figure who was bound by his binding technique. It wouldn't be that easy to break free. He would not give Yi Futian the opportunity. Chapter 2481, A Taste of One's Own Medicine. The light of Buddha from Shenyang Arhat's figure filled the sky. He had a stern expression. He placed his palms together and faced Yi Futian. He closed his eyes, and a heavenly eye appeared on his third eye. In an instant, within the space that was enveloped by the gigantic Buddha, other Buddhas appeared. Tens of thousands of ancient Buddhas filled the sky. They all remained in the same pose, wielding golden divine swords forged from the light of Buddha. They were actually wielding the Zhuxia swords used by the previous Buddhist cultivator who had battled Yi Futian. The immobilization technique and Zhuxia sword were previously used against Yi Futian by members of their sect. However, Yi Futian had used the Vajra spell, as well as the palm of Mahavairokkana to negate these techniques. Now, Shenyang Arhat unleashed these two techniques again. His techniques were clearly more powerful than the previous cultivator. He was using the space battle form to power up the immobilization technique and relying on the power of the various Buddhas to unleash the might of the Zhuxia swords. Each Buddha had special Buddhist seals. Their sharp swords were pointed towards Yi Futian. A faint murderous intent emanated from them. Shenyang Buddha Lord's line of Buddhist cultivators originally maintained the order in the world of Buddhism. They were naturally in charge of dealing judgment to perpetrators. There seemed to be more to their Zhuxia swords than met the eye. The various Buddhas charged forward with their Zhuxia swords enhanced with Buddhist doctrine. The space was immediately shattered, seeming as though it would be ripped apart. "He is unraveling the space," someone commented. Witnessing the might of the Zhuxia swords, the expressions of the various Buddhas were stern. Once one cultivated Buddhist doctrine to the utmost limit, it was rumored that one could detach themselves from all things, even space and time. Shenyang Arhat cultivated the space battle form and had absolute control over this space. Right now, he directed the Zhuxie sword, attempting to unravel the space. If this continued, Yi Futian's body would also disintegrate. This technique was extremely overbearing. As Shenyang Arhat attacked and defended, he unleashed 4 Buddhist superpowers. His ability was indeed extremely powerful. The Zhuxie sword unraveled the space and charged straight towards Yi Futian's coalesced battle form. From the Mahavairokkana battle form, the light of Buddha radiated outwards. Although Yi Futian was bound, the might of the battle form was still very powerful. The sound of Buddha circled the battle form. As Yi Futian chanted the Vajra spell, countless runes flowed around him. It was as though it enhanced the Mahavairokkana battle form, making it indestructible. Swoosh! The Zhuxie swords came crashing towards the Mahavairokkana battle form. The terrifying attack caused cracks to appear on it. It seemed as though it was about to shatter. When they saw this scene, the various Buddhas felt a sense of relief. It seemed that although Yi Futian was strong, he still could not withstand the might of Shenyang Arhat, who had similarly cultivated a powerful battle form. After all, there was still a gap between their cultivation planes. Even if Yi Futian was defeated, it was to be expected. After all, Buddhist doctrine was an ability that he had recently cultivated for several months. If Yi Futian could use all his original abilities in this battle, he might be more powerful. In terms of Buddhist doctrine, even though Yi Futian had extraordinary talent, it was still difficult for him to surpass Shenyang Arhat. This battle was about to end. Shenyang Arhat's attack was also extremely dangerous. If he was not careful and Yi Futian could not withstand his attack, Yi Futian might be heavily injured or even have his body of way crippled. It was obvious that Shenyang Arhat bore animosity towards Yi Futian. He would not hold back. If anything actually happened, he would not show mercy. More and more cracks appeared on Yi Futian's battle form. The various Buddhas unleashed their Zhuxie swords at the same time. It was difficult, even for the golden Mahavairokkana battle form, to withstand such an attack. It began to shatter and break apart. Shenyang Arhat's eyes were tightly shut, and his palms were together as he unleashed his powerful Buddhist superpowers. He did not look at Yi Futian, but he could sense everything that was happening. The corners of his mouth curled slightly into a smile, which was cold and sinister. However, Yi Futian stood there unshaken. His palms were still together as he chanted the sound of Buddha. The sound of Buddha circled around him. As the destructive Zhuxie swords came charging down, the gigantic Mahavairokkana battle form shattered into countless pieces. Under the besiegement of the Zhuxie swords, it was decimated. The destructive attack was about to strike Yi Futian. The various Buddhas kept staring in his direction. Would Yi Futian's figure be decimated as well? Under the watchful gazes of the various Buddhas, Yi Futian's body was surrounded by the light of Buddha. It was as though another battle form appeared. Just as the Zhuxie swords came crashing towards him, Yi Futian's body seemed to become ethereal. When the attack landed, cracks appeared in the space. However, Yi Futian was still there. He did not seem to be in the same space as the destructive power of the Zhuxie swords, but rather in a parallel space. This bizarre scene caused the various Buddhas to reveal strange expressions. The Zhuxie sword attack landed but did not touch Yi Futian's body. Instead, the swords immediately shattered. How did Yi Futian pull this off? It is the void battle form, someone exclaimed. A Buddha said, who would have thought that he managed to cultivate 3 battle forms? The Akalanatha battle form, the Mahavairokkana battle form, and the void battle form. The void battle form was another name for the space battle form. In actuality, they were the same Buddhist technique. Shenyang Arhat used the power of the void battle form to deal with Yi Futian. Yi Futian used the same battle form to evade. Despite this, both of them unleashed different abilities of the battle form. This space battle form was a powerful application of the power of the Great Path of Space by the Buddhist sects. Yi Futian was proficient in the Path of Space and had also cultivated the miniature world. Hence, he had managed to cultivate the void battle form. A Buddha lamented, compared to Donghuang the Great of the past, Yi Futian has spent less time cultivating Buddhist doctrine. However, he is also proficient in various Buddhist doctrines. These 3 battle forms are all difficult ones to cultivate, and he has actually mastered them. If he is given more time, he will most likely be as impressive as Donghuang the Great of the past, capable of mastering all kinds of Buddhist doctrines. Just as he was commenting, silhouettes of various Buddhas appeared on the battlefield. Each and every Buddha seemed to be formed with Yi Futian as the original. This was yet another application of the void battle form. Before this, Shenyang Arhat used the same technique to unleash the Zhuxia swords simultaneously. All the divine swords charged out at the same time. Yi Futian appeared to be mimicking Shenyang Arhat's move and the superpower he cultivated. Besides that, Yi Futian was no longer restrained by the spatial power. The Buddhas opened their mouths at the same time. Suddenly, raging roars filled the sky. Dragons and elephants could be faintly seen up above. When all the Buddhas shouted at the same time, their voices reverberated in space. The vast space seemed to turn into a sea with churning waves. The dragons and the elephants stirred up gigantic waves and destroyed everything around, forming a terrifying illusion. Shenyang Arhat appeared exceptionally tiny amidst the illusion. The Buddhas had been angered. This was their wrathful roar. The Buddhas summoned by Shenyang Arhat exploded in the sea and crumbled into dust right away. Even the gigantic illusory figure of Buddha, which enveloped the entire space, shook violently. It was on the verge of collapsing. The battle form of Shenyang Arhat became unstable as his spiritual soul trembled. He had yet to regain his composure from his surprise at Yi Futian cultivating the void battle form when an extremely overbearing Buddhist musical attack technique followed. Yi Futian's attack also did not seem to stop. The various Buddhas in the sky were still forming Buddhist divine seals. A majestic and vast power of Buddha pressed down on the space. Right now, Shenyang Arhat felt an intense sense of danger. Chapter 2482, Suppression. Rumble. Faced with the wrathful Buddhist roar, the Buddhas summoned by Shenyang Arhat shattered and were chipped away. The gigantic battle form shook as though it would crack into pieces at any given moment. The spiritual soul of Shenyang Arhat trembled as well. Aside from the raging roar, scorching suns appeared in the sky. The suns were hot and of utmost yang, capable of melting everything in the world. At the same time, their power was extremely overbearing. "They are all Mahavairokanas," someone exclaimed. All the Buddhist cultivators witnessed how the Buddhas summoned by Yi Futian transformed into Mahavairokanas. They unleashed the palms of Mahavairokana at the same time, intending to crush everything in this part of the space. It was the dual battle form. The Buddhist cultivators felt their hearts tremble as they stared in the direction where Yi Futian was. It was hard for them to stay calm. This dual battle form did not refer to Yi Futian cultivating 2 battle forms, but instead him combining 2 battle forms and unleashing them at the same time. Yi Futian initially unleashed the void battle form. Right now, he used the void battle form to summon various Buddhas, and they became Mahavairokanas. The 2 battle forms layered over each other as they attacked together. Their might was astonishing. In the sky above, the Mahavairokanas were no longer bound by space. Palms of Mahavairokana came pressing down at the same time, crashing down towards Shenyang Arhat below. They were overbearing. Shenyang Arhat placed his palms together, and the light of Buddha shone from his figure. The gigantic ancient Buddha that enveloped Spirit Mountain immediately shone with golden light. It seemed to be forming a physical presence. The space within this ancient Buddha seemed to be solidifying. The palms of Mahavairokana slowed down as they faced resistance. At the same time, many arms extended from the ancient Buddha behind Shenyang Arhat. All the arms unleashed void palms simultaneously to clash head-on with the incoming palms of Mahavairokana. Terrifying collision sounds reverberated throughout the space. The light of Buddha burst forth. Without exception, the void palms crumbled when faced with the palms of Mahavairokana. All the void palms shattered into pieces as the palms of Mahavairokana continued to charge forward and head straight towards Shenyang Arhat. Boom! 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 Menacing attacks cleared the space as they crashed towards Shenyang Arhat. However, right at this moment, beams of light of Buddha shot out into different locations. The area where Shenyang Arhat was reduced to dust under the attack of the palms of Mahavarokana. The flesh of Shenyang Arhat seemed to have been destroyed by it as well. However, the next moment, many figures of Shenyang Arhat popped up in different locations. They seemed to be his clones. Clearly, Shenyang Arhat was not injured by Yi Futian's attack. Void battle form against void battle form, exclaimed the various Buddhas. Their hearts were slightly stirred when they saw this scene. The user of the void battle form seemed omnipresent. Before this, Shenyang Arhat was not able to land an attack on Yi Futian. Now, Yi Futian's palms of Mahavarokana similarly could not hit Shenyang Arhat. The two of them seemed to have reached a stalemate. It was apparent that Shenyang Arhat was more powerful than the opponents that Yi Futian had encountered before. In the previous battles, once Yi Futian's powerful Buddhist superpowers were unleashed, he could crush his opponent. However, this time, even as the power of the dual battle form burst forth, he could not take down Shenyang Arhat. Both of them were proficient in Buddhist superpowers and had powerful battle forms. Hence, such a situation had occurred. However, although this battle was short, up to this point, the various Buddhas could tell that Yi Futian's comprehension of Buddhist doctrine was not inferior to Shenyang Arhat's own. His combat ability was similarly not weaker than that of the latter. Even with Shenyang Arhat's cultivation plane being higher than his, Yi Futian could still put up a fight. This made it apparent how outstanding Yi Futian was. This meant that if they were both on the same plane, Shenyang Arhat would have faced a crushing defeat. When Yi Futian sensed this, his heart was calm. He placed his palms together as the sound of Buddha circled around him. The sound of Buddha reverberated in the entire space. Gradually, a gigantic Buddha also appeared. It seemed to be seizing control of the space from the gigantic Buddha summoned by Shenyang Arhat. Besides that, the gigantic Buddha summoned by Yi Futian was accompanied by the sound of Buddha. The sound of Buddha contained a terrifying divine power that caused Shenyang Arhat's battle forms to tremble. This person can cultivate so many Buddhist doctrines simultaneously because his body was originally proficient in various powers of the Great Path such as flame, space, and sound, a Buddha exclaimed. The various Buddhas all nodded their heads slightly. Someone said, "He is indeed a rare genius. He is comparable to Donghuang the Great of the past." A senior Buddha refuted, "It's too high a praise to compare him with Donghuang the Great. Donghuang the Great had an unparalleled temperament, and he stood head and shoulders above the others of his generation. Aside from Emperor Yi Qing, he was uncontended. The Lord of all Buddhas praised him, and he soon reached the emperor level after that. He united the divine prefecture, and he has been unrivaled for centuries. If we want to pick someone who is on par with Donghuang the Great, the person has to be the Devil Emperor of the Devil World, who has earned his fame preceding Donghuang the Great." Another Buddhist cultivator said, "I think that Yi Futian is not any weaker than Donghuang the Great of the past. If Donghuang the Great was here, he might not have done any better than Yi Futian. Nevertheless, both of them are top geniuses." Donghuang the Great of the past was also proficient in various law powers. He was also well versed in Buddhist doctrine. Taking this point into consideration, that famous figure of the Devil World is indeed the only one who is comparable to Donghuang the Great. The speaker equated Donghuang the Great with the Devil Emperor. The two of them were similar. They were both proficient in various law powers. Back then, the Devil Emperor created various powerful demonic arts. Each and every one of them was overbearing. He defeated all the others of his generation and ended the chaotic era in the Devil World. "Shenyang Arhat will most likely lose," someone commented as they looked toward the battlefield. The two gigantic battle forms were engaged in battle. However, as Yi Futian unleashed his battle form, he was also unleashing the wrathful Buddhist roar and the demon-slaying cries of dragons and elephants. Rumor has it that these two techniques were Buddhist doctrine created by an ancient Buddha when he was suppressing the turmoil in hell. When cultivated to their extremes, these two techniques would allow the cultivator to dominate hell. Rumble. Terrifying sounds could be heard. The various Buddhas looked up into the sky. They were all enveloped within the two gigantic Buddhas. These two gigantic Buddhas were battling to seize control over the space. Right now, the one summoned by Yi Futian had seized the upper hand and consumed the one summoned by Shenyang Arhat. At the same time, on the battlefield, Shenyang Arhat's various clones were under constant heavy bombardment. Shenyang Arhat's expression had already changed. The sound of intense tremors could be heard. His battle form was broken. In the sky above, blinding sunlight burst forth. From the heavens, a gigantic Buddha palm reached down below. It seemed to be the palm of the true Mahavairokkana. This gigantic palm of Mahavairokkana came bearing down. The remaining clones of Shenyang Arhat turned to dust. Shenyang Arhat's true body appeared. As he looked at the palm of Mahavairokkana crashing down on him, his expression turned ugly. He raised both his hands, and the light of Buddha shone from him. He became an ancient Buddha that attempted to hold up the sky. Bang! The palm of Mahavairokkana came crashing down and slammed Shenyang Arhat's figure to the ground. He was pushed underground. The terrifying aftershocks shook Spirit Mountain, sending dust flying into the air. On the surface, a gigantic palm print was left behind. The earth in the gigantic palm print appeared scorched. Shenyang Arhat was buried deep within the ground. He kept throwing up fresh blood, and his face was pale. Chapter 2483, The Final Opponent. Shenyang Arhat was defeated. The various Buddhas looked towards the battlefield. Shenyang Arhat was the most talented disciple of Shenyang Buddha Lord. He had devoted himself to studying Buddhist doctrine for many years. In the entire Western heaven, he was considered one of the most outstanding figures of his generation. Only a few other Arhats, as well as the direct disciples of the Lord of all Buddhas, could defeat him. Such an existence had actually been defeated by Yi Futian, who had a lower cultivation level. He had even been suppressed in terms of Buddhist superpowers. From the looks of it, Yi Futian was truly going to achieve imitating Donghuang the Great and defeating the various Buddhas. Shenyang Buddha Lord looked towards him. He had a cold look of disappointment in his eyes. His chosen successor had been defeated. For him, it was naturally an utter disgrace. Back then, his elder brother was among the various Buddhas defeated by Donghuang the Great. Ever since that battle, his elder brother had begun cultivating in seclusion away from the world. He was extremely close with his elder brother. The latter had always taken care of him. The incident back then was a great blow to him. He had always considered that battle centuries ago to be the shame of the Buddhist sects. Who would have thought that history would repeat itself today? Yi Futian set foot on Spirit Mountain of Western Heaven and sought the path of Buddhist doctrine. He challenged various Buddhas and defeated the successor of Shenyang Buddha Lord. However, Yi Futian came to Spirit Mountain openly with the valid reason of learning Buddhist doctrine from the Buddhas present. Shenyang Buddha Lord had no excuse to target Yi Futian. Moreover, he knew that among the Buddhas present, some of them were kind towards Yi Futian. They admired his talents and looked highly on him. Wutian Buddha Lord was one of them. He even assigned his disciple, Yumu, to welcome Yi Futian. Wutian Buddha Lord had a smile on his face throughout Yi Futian's battles with the Buddhas. He seemed to hold Yi Futian in high regard. One could figure this out based on the way Wutian Buddha Lord spoke about him. Furthermore, nothing in Western Heaven could escape the eyes of the Lord of all Buddhas. Occurrences on Spirit Mountain were no exception too. How would the Lord of all Buddhas respond after witnessing everything that happened here? Would he meet Yi Futian personally? When Shenyang Buddha Lord thought of this, he looked somewhere. Seated over there was a Buddha. This Buddha maintained a smile throughout the whole event as he sat on a futon. He quietly observed everything that happened. He spoke very little. His eyes became two lines as he smiled gently. He appeared exceptionally warm and made people feel comfortable around him. He was wearing a kasaya, and half of his chest could be seen. Prayer beads were hanging on his neck. As both his hands fingered the beads continuously, the prayer beads turned around his neck. Shenyang Buddha Lord put his hands together and bowed towards this Buddha. He said, "Buddha, may I consult your opinion regarding this youth?" Judging from Shenyang Buddha Lord's speech, one could tell that this Buddha Lord had extraordinary standing. Even Shenyang Buddha Lord was so polite with him by regarding him as Buddha and consulting his opinion. With a smile and wrinkly eyes, this Buddha Lord looked at Shenyang Buddha Lord and said, "I'm not worthy of the title Buddha. This youth has come to Spirit Mountain to seek the Buddhist path. Judging from his performance, he is very outstanding. As for the rest, it depends on whether he can make it to our level and whether the Lord of all Buddhas is willing to meet him." When Shenyang Buddha Lord heard the other party's reply, he understood that the latter had no intention of saying much. This Buddha Lord was no ordinary figure. He was all-knowing and could peek into the past and the future of other people. He knew Yi Futian's fate. Besides that, he had profound Buddhist doctrine now that he had attained his status as a Buddha. He might even be able to see Yi Futian's future. Shenyang Buddha Lord purposely inquired about Yi Futian to get some information about Yi Futian from this Buddha Lord. However, the other party was unwilling to reveal even a tiny bit of information. He casually steered the conversation in another direction. Of course, the Buddha Lord's response was befitting to his personality. It was normal for him to reveal nothing that he knew. Shenyang Buddha Lord didn't pester him either. He looked at Tongchan Buddha Lord and the others. The battle a few centuries ago is still fresh in our minds. Today is yet another day of sparring with Buddhist doctrine. Your disciples are all well versed in Buddhist doctrine. Surely they are better than this disciple of mine. Why don't they stand out to join the battle? Let this outsider truly experience our Buddhist doctrine. His speech intended to goad the others into action. The hidden meaning behind his speech was clear. If they allowed Yi Futian to reach them today, they would make it seem as though no cultivator in Western heaven was proficient in Buddhist doctrine. The various Buddhas looked ahead. They could see that Yi Futian was still moving upwards. He was bathed in the brilliant light of Buddha. He seemed unstoppable. In the space below him, Shenyang Arhat remained where he was. It looked as though Yi Futian had advanced by stepping over Shenyang Arhat's head. One could imagine the humiliation Shenyang Arhat was feeling right now. However, Yi Futian paid no heed to it. He did not do this to other Buddhist cultivators, but he purposely shamed Shenyang Arhat. If Shenyang Arhat had emerged victorious instead, he would surely have done much worse to Yi Futian. The various Buddhas had mixed feelings when they saw this scene. The battle today would certainly leave a permanent scar in Shenyang Arhat's heart. Yi Futian advanced forward. No one emerged to stop him. He gradually approached the highest place, the highest heaven of Spirit Mountain. It was where the various Buddha Lords were. If Yi Futian actually reached there, it meant that he was truly more capable than various Buddhas. Shenyang Buddha Lord frowned. Did all these people really plan to sit back and watch Yi Futian succeed? Today, various Buddhas had gathered. Among the younger generation, Shenyang Arhat was not the strongest cultivator. Yumu, for example, was very powerful. Unfortunately, he was a disciple of Wutian Buddha Lord and bore goodwill towards Yi Futian. Naturally, he would not attack him. However, there were many other powerful figures under different Buddha Lords. The eyes of Shenyang Buddha Lord narrowed as he watched Yi Futian progressing upwards and slowly approaching them. Could it be that he really needed to let Yi Futian have his way? Right at this moment, on the second heaven, a figure emerged and stood in front of Yi Futian. Yi Futian was very close to reaching the top. The peak seemed to be within his reach. When Shenyang Buddha Lord saw the challenger emerge, he heaved a sigh of relief. At last, someone came forward. Besides that, his worries were put to rest when he saw who the challenger was. The cultivator who came forward was not a disciple of this generation of Buddha Lords. He had been an Arhat for a few generations. His cultivation was definitely not any weaker than that of other Arhats. In fact, he was much stronger than most of them. There was nothing special about his identity. It could even be regarded as ordinary. However, he had maintained this ordinary status for more than 1,000 years. No one knew exactly how long he had been here. The crowd only knew that he was once an attendant of the Lord of all Buddhas. Back when the Lord of all Buddhas was still cultivating on Spirit Mountain, this Arhat organized scriptures for the Lord and ran errands for him. His duties included taking care of Spirit Mountain of Western Heaven. His identity as an attendant was naturally a lot lower when compared to that of other arhats, who were direct disciples of the Buddha lords. However, no one dared to look down on him. This point was proven based on how high up he was. The second heaven was a level where only Buddhas could stand. Rumor has it that this arhat was dim-witted. Hence, even though he had been an attendant for the Lord of all Buddhas for many years, he had yet to break through the shackles and undergo the tribulation of the Great Path. This was the reason why he had stayed at the peak of his cultivation plane for such a long time. However, on this cultivation plane, no one among the Buddhist sects dared to claim that they could defeat him for sure. Chapter 2484, Humbled. This monk was known as Bitter Zen. Rumor has it that he began following the Lord of all Buddhas when he was but an acolyte. Futian stopped in his tracks. When he saw Bitter Zen emerge, he sensed a faint pressure. Even though there was no powerful aura emanating from Bitter Zen's figure, his calm and indifferent temperament contained a dangerous will. Moreover, Futian himself knew clearly that since his opponent emerged after Shenyang Arhat was defeated, he would certainly be more powerful than him. "I am Bitter Zen. Greetings, Benefactor Yi," greeted Bitter Zen as he placed his palms together and bowed at Futian. He was courteous and respectful. "Greetings, Master," replied Futian as he returned the gesture. Master Bitter Zen has followed the Lord of all Buddhas and cultivated under him for many years. He is revered amongst the Buddhist sects. "Benefactor Yi, you need to be cautious," Wutian Buddha Lord said with a smile from the highest heaven. His introduction for Bitter Zen was different. The latter had been cultivating under the Lord of all Buddhas and was revered. Clearly, Bitter Zen was respected even among the Buddha Lord level figures. No one looked down on him at all just because he had been the attendant of the Lord of all Buddhas. When Futian heard Wutian Buddha Lord say this, he was surprised. So this monk actually had such a background. He bowed once again and said, "It is an honor to receive personal instruction from you, Master." "Wutian Buddha Lord, you speak too highly of me. I am but an attendant of the Lord of all Buddhas. I merely run errands. Benefactor Yi, you have only cultivated Buddhist doctrine for several months since you came from the divine prefecture. Just like that, your Buddhist doctrine has surpassed the various Buddhas here. I am extremely impressed. Your comprehension of Buddhist doctrine is deep enough to have obtained the teachings of the dual battle form. Hence, I came forward to seek some pointers from you regarding Buddhist doctrine," said Bitter Zen humbly and politely. Both of them appeared exceptionally humble. They did not seem like two people who were about to engage in a huge fight. "Master, after you," said Futian. "Please, after you." After the two of them exchanged pleasantries, a dazzling light of Buddha radiated from both their figures. Futian's Mahavairokkana battle form remained. He seemed to have become Mahavairokkana and was blinding to look at. He raised his hand and pointed it forward. A palm of Mahavairokkana charged towards Bitter Zen. This was naturally just an attack to test the waters. With the palm of Mahavairokkana alone, Futian could not even defeat Shenyang Arhat. Bitter Zen would naturally have no issues dealing with it. Bitter Zen stood there, not moving an inch. The light of Buddha circled around him as his mouth moved slightly. No one could hear what he was uttering. However, the Buddhist voice reverberated throughout the space. Countless Buddhist runes flowed out of Bitter Zen's mouth. In an instant, a solemn air descended upon the land. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. The sound of Buddha circled around them. It was as though a Buddha had awakened. It seemed that there was only the Buddha present, and no evil powers could exist here. At the same time, Bitter Zen's figure was changing. His body turned golden and began to expand. Accompanied by the mantra, he became a gigantic true Buddha. He was even bigger than Futian's Mahavairokkana battle form. It was the 6 syllables of truth. Futian thought to himself as his heart trembled. The Buddhist 6 syllables of truth appeared simple, yet they were esoteric. Anyone could cultivate them, but only in form. It was impossible to comprehend the meaning of the 6 syllables of truth. Only the Buddhas who were proficient in Buddhist doctrine and had an extremely deep comprehension could understand its true essence. In the entire Western heaven, the number of Buddhas who successfully cultivated the 6 syllables of truth could be counted on one hand. They were all top-tier Buddhas, and Bitter Zen was actually one of them. Bang! The palm of Mahavairokkana crashed into the gigantic golden figure of Bitter Zen. His golden figure did not budge at all. It was stable and firm. On the other hand, the palm of Mahavairokkana immediately shattered. It was apparent how sturdy the golden body was. "It is the reality battle form," someone exclaimed. The hearts of the various Buddhas stirred when they witnessed this scene. It was as expected of Bitter Zen, the monk who had followed the Lord of all Buddhas for so many years. He had already cultivated the reality battle form to perfection. By merging the 6 syllables of truth and the reality battle form, his Buddha figure was indestructible and immovable. Futian's palm of Mahavairokkana was domineering. However, when it struck Bitter Zen's golden battle form, it shattered on its own. It could not move Bitter Zen's golden figure at all. This time, Futian had truly encountered a powerful opponent. In the battles before this, the other Buddhist cultivators could not force Futian's battle form to budge. Now, it was his attack, which could not break Bitter Zen's golden body's defense. The tables had turned now. Futian felt a pressure acting on him. It was to be expected of a master who cultivated under the Lord of all Buddhas. Once his opponent began attacking, Futian could sense the strength of the other party's Buddhist doctrine. Under the effects of the 6 syllables of truth, the entire space seemed to be controlled by his opponent and contained powerful Buddhist doctrine. The 6 syllables of truth did not appear to have any power. However, their might was formless. They contained the utmost wisdom and were enhanced by powerful Buddhist doctrine. As the 6 syllables of truth expanded outwards, the entire spirit mountain was lit up with the light of Buddha. Endless light enveloped the battlefield. Formless might of Buddha was contained within the light. Futian could actually sense the power of the various Buddhas enhancing his opponent's power. At that moment, he could truly sense the terrifying pressure and the might of his opponent. Futian had a stern expression. His void battle form appeared, and a gigantic Buddha enveloped the vast space. Figures of many Buddhas appeared in the surrounding space, all of them unleashing a powerful light of Buddha. Futian attempted to unleash the powerful attack he had used against Shenyang Ahat again. However, the 6 syllables of truth did not yield. The gigantic golden Buddha that Bitter Zen had become had his eyes shut tightly. His palms were together in front of his chest. The syllables of truth reverberated throughout the sky. Endless light of Buddha coalesced above, and silhouettes of gigantic Buddhas appeared. What was even more terrifying was that the face of a Buddha seemed to form in the sky. It gazed down upon them. The entire sky had become the silhouette of a Buddha. It was just like how the face of great Emperor Ziwei had appeared in the starry world back then. That was not all. Down below, in 3 different directions, 3 powerful Buddhas appeared. They seemed to be the Trikaya, the 3 bodies of Buddha. Terrifying light emanated from these 3 figures. They immediately surrounded the gigantic Buddha summoned by Futian. Aside from that, around the various Buddhas that Futian had summoned, a sea of other Buddhas appeared. The various Buddhas had all appeared at once and surrounded the ones Futian summoned. In every direction, Futian was outmatched. Futian opened his eyes and looked at the scene around him. Under the light of Buddha, the sound of Buddha circled around him, solemn and divine. This divine might landed on him without any murderous intent. There was only the unparalleled might of Buddha. It was as though the true Buddha had descended. When Futian saw this scene, at first, he was somewhat reluctant. Then, he felt a sense of relief. He looked towards Bitter Zen and placed his palms together. He then bowed slightly at Bitter Zen and said, "Master, your comprehension of Buddhist doctrine is deep. It is not something I can compare to. I admit my defeat." As Futian said this, he immediately retracted his aura. The light of Buddha on his body instantly receded. He had no desire to compete. He knew that he was still far inferior to his opponent in terms of attainments in Buddhist doctrine. 1,000 years of hard work in cultivation was not something he could compete with using just dozens of days of effort. Chapter 2485, The Lord of All Buddhas. Bitter Zen placed his palms together, and his light of Buddha retracted. In an instant, the silhouettes of Buddhas in the sky vanished, and everything returned to a calm state. It was as though nothing had happened. He bowed towards Futian and said, "I have spent a millennium on Spirit Mountain and only managed to catch a glimpse of the path of Buddha. Benefactor Yi, you have merely cultivated Buddhist doctrine for dozens of days and already have such high attainment. I am ashamed of myself." It was not quite fair to compare Futian's dozens of days of contact with Buddhist doctrine with his own millennia spent on it. They were not even on the same level. However, it was with this background that Futian made his way up here and defeated the various Buddhist cultivators. Although Futian eventually admitted his defeat to Bitter Zen, in reality, he had only lost in terms of the duration spent on Buddhist doctrine. Bitter Zen was a monk who had followed the Lord of all Buddhas for more than a millennia. The influence of his surroundings greatly aided him in cultivating the Buddhist path. The various Buddhas watched the two humble men. This outcome was expected. After all, it was Bitter Zen who had stepped forward. Futian imitated Donghuang the Great of the past. However, in the end, Futian was not him. When Donghuang the Great came to the Western world, his cultivation was much stronger than that of Futian, and he had also previously comprehended Buddhist doctrine for many years. If they disregarded his other abilities and only looked at his Buddhist doctrine attainment, Donghuang the Great was already a Buddha-level figure back then. It was only under such circumstances that Donghuang the Great had managed to defeat all the various Buddhas. It was normal for Futian to fail at what the former had achieved. Moreover, the person who got in his way was Bitter Zen. It was already an extraordinary achievement for him to reach this stage and even defeat Shenyang Arhat. If it were any other person, it would have been nearly impossible for them to achieve what he had accomplished. "Master Bitter Zen, you are too courteous. This person has come today to Spirit Mountain to challenge the Buddhist sects. If you did not step forward, he might have thought that no one in our sects could prove a match for him," said Shenyang Buddha Lord. When he saw Bitter Zen treating Futian so politely, he felt a sense of dissatisfaction. He swept a glance at Futian and said, "Buddha is merciful. Today, you came to cause trouble on Spirit Mountain. However, since it is all Buddha's fest, we will not find fault with you. Descend from the mountain." When he said this, a cold and indifferent look flashed past in his eyes. Under Buddha's clairvoyance, even if Futian descended from the mountain, where could he go? Futian would not be able to escape his heavenly eye. He would settle the score with Futian after all Buddha's fest had ended. This cultivator from the divine prefecture had to remain in Western heaven. Although Futian did not know what Shenyang Buddha Lord was thinking, he could sense the latter's animosity towards him. It was normal for Futian to be defeated today. When he came here, he never thought that he would be able to defeat the various Buddhas. He had merely given it a try. In the end, he lost to Bitter Zen in the final battle. Of course, Futian could accept this outcome. Since he had been defeated, he would need to leave soon. It was best that he left Western heaven before all Buddha's fest ended. He turned around and glanced towards Hua Qingqing. He revealed an apologetic look. However, Hua Qingqing was smiling and seemingly did not mind. "Wutian Buddha Lord was kind to us. Should we ask him to let you stay here and cultivate the path of Buddha? That way, you will have a chance to meet the Lord of all Buddhas in the future," Futian asked Hua Qingqing over transmitted thoughts. If they left just like that, they wouldn't have the chance to meet the Lord of all Buddhas. If they missed this opportunity, who knows when they could return here? All that has happened on Spirit Mountain will not escape the eyes of the Lord of all Buddhas. If he is willing to see me, he will naturally do so. If he isn't, it would be meaningless to stay behind, Hua Qingqing replied softly. Futian nodded his head slightly. Buddhist superpowers were miraculous. The Lord of all Buddhas was certainly proficient in many Buddhist techniques. Everything that had occurred here would surely be known to him. When Futian heard Hua Qingqing's response, he knew that she was very clear about this, so he did not say any more. He turned to face the various Buddhas and said, "Today, I came to seek pointers on the path of Buddha and have gained much insight. There is no limit to Buddhist doctrine. Many thanks for your guidance. I apologize for having disturbed you all. Farewell." He placed his palms together and the light of Buddha flowed around his figure as he said this. He bowed towards the various Buddha lords and prepared to descend the mountain and leave. "Wait a moment," a voice called out just as Yi Futian was turning to leave. Yi Futian looked towards the person who had spoken. He was a Buddha lord who was seated at the very top. He narrowed his eyes and looked at Yi Futian with a smile. It was the Buddha lord who Shenyang Buddha lord had been very polite to and referred to as Buddha. "Buddha lord," Yi Futian greeted. He bowed when he heard the other party calling him. "Is there anything else?" Shenyang Buddha lord and the other Buddhas all turned towards the Buddha lord who had spoken. They were somewhat surprised. This Buddha lord rarely spoke. Now, he had actually held Yi Futian back. What was he about to do? "Benefactor Yi, you will know in a moment," the Buddha lord said with a smile. He narrowed his eyes and looked up into the sky. Yi Futian felt somewhat curious. Wutian Buddha lord also smiled and looked up into the sky above Spirit Mountain. This Buddha lord cultivated omniscience. If he wanted Yi Futian to wait, he naturally had his reasons for doing so. "Is something above Spirit Mountain?" asked Yi Futian. He looked up but did not see anything. The mountain was quiet. Everyone was waiting. It seemed that everyone here paid attention to every word and act of the Buddha Lord. Just then, rainbow light descended from the sky. The next moment, the light enveloped Spirit Mountain. A gigantic Buddha figure appeared in the heavens above. Right now, the entire mountain was bathed in the divine light of Buddha. Seemingly realizing that something had occurred, the various Buddhas on Spirit Mountain all got up and bowed towards the heavens. They had respectful expressions and appeared pious. "Greetings, Lord of all Buddhas. Greetings, Lord of all Buddhas." Their voices reverberated throughout Spirit Mountain. The various Buddhas were all bowing. Regardless of their level, all the Buddhas were in the same pose, bowing with their palms together. Yi Futian naturally understood who had arrived. Only the Lord of all Buddhas could make all the various Buddhas bow and welcome him simultaneously. Yi Futian's heart stirred. He was somewhat moved. The Lord of all Buddhas had actually come. That meant that the Buddha Lord before this had asked him to wait because he knew that the Lord of all Buddhas was coming. When he realized this, Yi Futian also bowed and placed his palms together. Hua Qingqing looked up at the sky with her beautiful eyes at the Lord of all Buddhas. Seemingly noticing her gaze, the Buddha in the sky looked towards her and revealed a kind smile. Hua Qingqing immediately felt her heart tremble. She bowed and said, "Greetings, Lord of all Buddhas. I merely came to visit Spirit Mountain." "Everyone, you need not be so ceremonious," said the Buddha in the sky to the various Buddhas below as he placed his palms together. He appeared very polite. This scene moved Yi Futian. It appeared that the Buddhist sects indeed had different manners compared to other worlds. Just as the various Buddhas had said before this, although all life was equal and the Buddhas were no exception, there was a difference in their comprehension of Buddhist doctrine. The Lord of all Buddhas did not have a high and mighty attitude, but his comprehension of Buddhist doctrine was the most profound among the Buddhist sects. Hence, he was the Lord of all Buddhas, and the various Buddhas bowed to him. Chapter 2486, Reincarnation. As the Buddha light shone, all of the Buddhas shifted to make space for one position. That was the position above and in the middle of them all. No one sat at that position before because it had been reserved for the Lord of all Buddhas all along. As the Lord of all Buddhas descended, his figure appeared on that seat. He said to the Buddhas, "Buddhas, please take your seats." Everyone nodded and sat down one after another. Atop the skies, all of the cultivators had their gazes fixed on the Lord of all Buddhas. Yi Futian and Hua Qingqing were still standing there with bitter zen. At this point, Yi Futian was also examining the Lord of all Buddhas. His entire body shined magnificently. It was clearly no longer a body of a common man but was the golden frame. Yi Futian had come face to face with the will of several great emperors, Emperor Yi Qing's remnant soul, and Donghuang the Great's projection, yet he couldn't tell whether or not the Lord of all Buddhas that he saw before him was his true form. However, this was probably the closest he had ever come to great emperor-level cultivators. Even if it weren't his true form, it was, at least, his incarnation. Buddha Lord, Bitter Zen put his palms together and bowed toward the Lord of all Buddhas. He was the apprentice child of the Lord of all Buddhas and was considered close to the Lord. Bitter Zen, you have followed me in cultivation for so many years, and I considered you to have stepped foot on the Buddhist path. What do you think about having an exchange with our little friend Yi here regarding the Buddhist doctrine? The Lord of all Buddhas smiled and asked. He appeared very amiable. There was no sign of majesty or grandeur typical of the great emperors. As the cultivators on the Spirit Mountain bathed under his Buddhist light, they all felt like they were being caressed the spring breeze. Perhaps, that was the power of the great Buddha. Benefactor Yi is also fated with Buddhism. If he cultivates for just 10 years, his understanding of the Buddhist doctrine will surely surpass mine, Bitter Zen replied. When he said 10 years, Yi Futian didn't feel that there was anything wrong. Master Bitter Zen's understanding of the Buddhist doctrine was indeed extraordinary. Even if he was really given 10 years, he may not be able to surpass him. Bitter Zen's appraisal of Yi Futian was already really high. After all, he had cultivated under the Lord of all Buddhas for 1,000 years. The Buddhas present also understood the significance of Bitter Zen's evaluation of Yi Futian. The Lord of all Buddhas smiled and nodded. He looked toward Yi Futian and said, Yi Futian, you came to the Spirit Mountains this time for her, right? As he spoke, his gaze turned toward Hua Qingqing. A gentle smile continued to be present in his golden iris, along with a sense of sympathy. Yes, I did come for Hua Qingqing. Master Bitter Zen said that I was fated with Buddhism. Actually, it's related to her as well. I believe this connection with Buddhism was, in part, bestowed upon me by her, Yi Futian replied. Indeed. The Lord of all Buddhas nodded. A fate connected to Buddhism is a fate connected to the Buddha. Thus, being related to Hua Qingqing was Yi Futian's fated connection to Buddhism in itself. When the Lord of all Buddhas looked toward Hua Qingqing, Buddha light instantly started shining upon her. This light was gentle, and as it illuminated Hua Qingqing, it made her appear even more holy. It even seemed like the light of the Buddha started to emanate from her as her entire body shone magnificently. It was akin to the light of a lamp. Her body levitated into the air and came before the Lord of all Buddhas. The Lord reached out and placed his hand on her head. Instantly, a cylindrical light screen encircled Hua Qingqing. It was as though she was a female Buddha. All entities have spirits. In the past, even I didn't expect that you would awaken intelligence. Ancient Buddha Qingdeng, you've accompanied me in cultivation for many years, so I gifted you an opportunity in the cycle of life and death, allowing you to reincarnate. That's why you have your current life. Now, have you recalled your memories? The Lord of all Buddhas said with a smile as he retracted his hand. Hua Qingqing put her palms together. A spot of light appeared between her brows. It looked like a lamp and made her appear more holy. I was originally a lamp before, Hua Qingqing muttered, Lord Buddha. Obviously, she had recalled her past. The Lord of all Buddhas smiled and nodded slightly. Hua Qingqing turned and looked toward Yi Futian. Her eyes were exceedingly clear and pure. Now that she had recalled her past life, it made sense that she favored the ancient Buddha Qingdeng because this had been her destiny all along. She was the ancient Buddha Qingdeng in her past life, she was a lamp before the Buddha, and she had accompanied the ancient Buddha in his cultivation. Greetings, great Buddha. Bitter Zen bowed and paid his respects to Hua Qingqing. He put his palms together, and his expression was very solemn. He appeared exceptionally respectful. Greetings, great Buddha. Quite a number of Buddhist cultivators bowed to Hua Qingqing, with the exception of a few Buddha Lord-level cultivators who had seen an incredible number of years in cultivation. While Hua Qingqing was young, it was only her age in her current life. Back when she cultivated alongside the Lord of all Buddhas, she had experienced a nearly indefinite period of time, living for longer than even Bitter Zen. After being by the Lord for such an incredibly long time, she could be truly said to have accompanied the Buddha Lord in cultivation. As such, even bitter Zen honored her by calling her Great Buddha. Among the Buddhas present there, most were considered her juniors. Shenyang Buddha Lord and others who were hostile toward Yi Futian were all startled. Of course they knew about the Buddhist lamp of the Lord of all Buddhas. But Hua Qingqing, she was the reincarnation of the Lord's Buddhist lamp. Back then, the Qingdeng accompanied the Lord of all Buddhas through his cultivation journey. As eons passed by, Qingdeng listened to countless years of Buddhist sutra and eventually gained intelligence. So, the Lord of all Buddhas used his supreme command of the Buddhist doctrine to help this Buddhist lamp reincarnate as a human. This story was passed down in the Buddhism world all along, but no one expected that Yi Futian, who came to the Spirit Mountains today to consult about the Buddhist doctrine, had actually come for the Buddhist lamp. If that was the case, then they knew that within the world of Buddhism, it would be extremely difficult for them to target Yi Futian. Hua Qingqing bowed toward the Buddhas as well and said, "Greetings, Buddhas." Yi Futian smiled too as he saw this scene. When Hua Jiyu first mentioned this to him, he was in shock and disbelief as well. Hua Qingqing was actually the lamp before the Buddha, so it was no wonder she was able to protect Jiyu and prevent her spiritual soul from being obliterated. Now that he was able to send Hua Qingqing back to the Spirit Mountain to return under the Buddha Lord for cultivation, this whole saga had been brought to a satisfactory conclusion. In that case, I have completed my mission, Yi Futian smiled as he said. With the Buddha Lord's care, of course he wouldn't have to worry about Hua Qingqing anymore. Even across the entire world, there probably wasn't a single person capable of hurting her now. Hua Qingqing looked toward Yi Futian with a gentle smile. Then, the Buddha Lord spoke, "Perhaps it's too early to say that." Yi Futian was a little taken aback by what the Lord of all Buddhas said. He asked, "Please enlighten me." She had reincarnated for cultivation, and so she lives a different life now. She hasn't concluded all of her fated connections with the mortal world, so she won't be able to take refuge in Buddhism. The time hasn't arrived, the Lord of all Buddhas said with a smile. Yi Futian was startled. Did he mean to let Hua Qingqing continue to mature in the common world and then cultivate there? Hua Qingqing, what do you think? The Lord of all Buddhas asked her. I'll heed the arrangements of the Lord, Hua Qingqing answered. The Lord of all Buddhas continued, I've helped you recall your memories from your past life this time. Back then, when you had just awakened your intellect, you had already been following alongside me for many years in cultivation. This is why you are proficient in the Buddhist doctrine and can help Yi Futian with his cultivation. Now that these memories have returned to you, you shall return to the mortal world to continue experiencing and developing. Upon the time your fate with the mortal world had ended, that is the day you will become a Buddha. Hua Qingqing didn't say anything else. She put her palms together and bowed, agreeing to the Buddha Lord's words in silence. Upon hearing this, Yi Futian also understood that it wasn't time for Hua Qingqing to return to the Spirit Mountain yet. With that, does that mean that he had made this trip for nothing? But through this, he had managed to find the confirmed identity of Hua Qingqing and help her to regain her memories. That alone was worth this journey. Chapter 2487, Cultivation on the Spirit Mountain. Yi Futian put his palms together and bowed toward the Lord of all Buddhas. He said, Thank you very much. My visit this time was a little discourteous, so I seek your forgiveness. I'll now bring Hua Qingqing down the mountain and return. No hurry, the Lord smiled and replied, Yi Futian, the Buddha of Destiny already said that you have been fated with Buddhism. It was an arduous journey to come to the Spirit Mountains and send Hua Qingqing back to restore her memories. Of course, the Buddha will not let you return empty-handed. Yi Futian was a little astounded. Shenyang Buddha Lord's expression revealed some agitation. Was the Lord of all Buddhas going to do the same thing as he did to Donghuang the Great and pass on the Buddhist doctrine to Yi Futian? A smile spread across Hua Qingqing's face. Not only did they manage to eliminate the dangers of this trip, but they had even turned mishap into opportunity. I see, this is the Buddha of Destiny. Yi Futian looked at the Lord of all Buddhas, who had his eyes narrowed. He guessed that this Buddha Lord must be an ancient Buddha who had cultivated omniscience, mysterious and unfathomable. He wondered whether the Buddha Lord could actually get a glimpse of his destiny. At his level, even if he couldn't see everything, he could at least see a fraction of it. The Lord of all Buddha's gaze also landed on the Buddha of Destiny as he asked, "Great Buddha, which Buddhist superpower do you think is suitable for Yi Futian to practice?" Besides Hua Qingqing, benefactor Yi's fated connection with Buddhism could also be a tinge related to Wutian Buddha Lord. The Buddha of Destiny's eyes narrowed as he smiled. Wutian Buddha Lord previously helped Yi Futian to defuse some dangers and let his student Yumu stay by Yi Futian's side. Indeed, the Buddha Lord said. If that's the case, then we shall teach celerity. Wutian Buddha Lord, what do you think? I'll heed the Buddha Lord's arrangements. Wutian Buddha Lord smiled and said. He did, in fact, have good intentions toward Yi Futian. Yi Futian was someone blessed by the heavens. If celerity were passed down to him, it would also benefit the promulgating of the Buddhist doctrine. Yi Futian, are you willing? The Lord of all Buddhas looked toward Yi Futian and asked. He wanted to impart celerity to Yi Futian, one of the 6 superpowers of Buddhism. Celerity was also known as teletransportation or willful travel. Cultivated at the highest level, it would allow the user to appear anywhere in the world at will. This was the ultimate cultivation in space and teleportation. Before this, the Buddha Lord asked the Buddha of Destiny whether there were deeper meanings to this. With the powers of the Lord of all Buddhas and the Buddha of Destiny, rather than the glimpse of his future that they could catch, could it be that they were imparting to him celerity to help him safeguard his life? Of course, regardless of the reason, cultivating one of the 6 Buddhist superpowers was an enormous opportunity in itself. I am humbled. Throughout this trip to Spirit Mountain, I have already learned a significant number of Buddhist doctrines. Now, the Buddha Lord is willing to impart me one of the 6 Buddhist superpowers. I'm truly grateful. Yi Futian bowed down in gratitude. The Lord of all Buddhas nodded. As for the teaching of celerity, we'll have to trouble Wutian Buddha Lord. Is that all right? Wutian Buddha Lord bowed as well. Glad to be of service. Thank you very much, Wutian Buddha Lord. Yi Futian bowed toward Wutian Buddha Lord as well. This trip to the Buddhist world in the Western Heaven wasn't a smooth journey. They had encountered many setbacks and hindrances, were chased by cultivators wanting to kill them, and they had seen the destruction of the divine frame. Even at Spirit Mountain of the Western Heaven, there were still many great Buddhas who were hostile toward him. But the end result was still very satisfactory to him. Those like Lord of all Buddhas, Wutian Buddha Lord, Buddha of Destiny, and Master Bitter Zen were all very respectable Buddhist cultivators. Of course, Yi Futian wouldn't dwell on whether the Lord of all Buddhas had some ulterior motives in doing this. The Lord of all Buddhas was a great emperor-level cultivator. At this level, there was no need to cover up anything toward someone like Yi Futian, so naturally, the Buddha Lord would just do as he wished. All right, I have disturbed you, Buddhas. Feel free to continue. I shall now take my leave, the Lord of all Buddhas said. As his voice sounded, Buddhist light erupted, and his golden frame gradually turned into a phantom. His body just disappeared into thin air. Before the Buddhas could even react, he had already left. But the Buddhas weren't surprised. It was incredibly rare for the Lord of all Buddhas to show himself. He only appeared on Spirit Mountain because of Yi Futian and Hua Qingqing. Moreover, this wasn't his true form in the first place. After the Lord of all Buddhas left, the Buddhas were all left with different thoughts. Benefactor Yi and Benefactor Hua should stay on Spirit Mountain and attend the All Buddhas Fest. It's about to come to an end anyway, Tianyin Buddha Lord said with a smile. Several other Buddhas nodded in agreement. Hua Qingqing was the lamp of the Buddha Lord, and since Yi Futian had sent her to the Spirit Mountain, there was nothing wrong with her attending the All Buddhas Fest. Congratulations to Benefactor Yi, Yanyin Arhat said with a smile. Yi Futian nodded and thanked him. Yumu, who was standing on the side, also nodded to Yi Futian to pay respects. Yi Futian put his palms together and returned the greeting. Tianyin Arhat then smiled and said, "Please take a seat, Yi Benefactor." "Thank you very much." Yi Futian wasn't too reserved and walked to the position beside Tianyin Arhat. Hua Qingqing wanted to follow him, but Wutian Buddha Lord said, "Great Buddha once accompanied the Lord of all Buddhas in cultivation, so please sit here instead." Hua Qingqing hesitated for a bit. But when she saw Yi Futian nodding at her, she didn't think too much about it. She went to the highest heaven and sat in the seat beside Wutian Buddha Lord. Congratulations to benefactor Yi. Tongchan Ahat also looked toward Yi Futian and spoke with a smile on his face. Yi Futian looked at him a little alarmed. He controlled his inner thoughts and didn't overthink so the others wouldn't read his thoughts. The All Buddhas Fest continued, but everyone now had their own agendas and thoughts, and the atmosphere wasn't quite there. As the 10,000th year of the All Buddhas calendar arrived, Buddhist light that spanned thousands of miles shrouded the entire Spirit Mountain. This day, many Buddhist cultivators set off from Spirit Mountains and headed toward the Western Heaven to promulgate the Buddhist doctrine. The entire Western Heaven was lit up with liveliness on this spectacular occasion. On this day, the great Buddhas also left one after another to return to their own cultivation areas. Yi Futian didn't leave. Atop Spirit Mountain, Yi Futian sat before an ancient temple and cultivated with his eyes closed. Beside him, Hua Qingqing was sitting there as well, and Buddhist light encircled her. There seemed to be Buddhist halos behind her, appearing incredibly divine and holy. The Buddhist light also illuminated Yi Futian's body. Before them, a great Buddha sat. It was Wutian Buddha Lord. He was passing his teachings to Yi Futian just now, imparting to him one of the 6 Buddhist superpowers, celerity. After a while, Yi Futian opened his eyes. He put his palms together toward Wutian Buddha Lord and said, "Thank you, Buddha Lord, for your teachings. How are you feeling?" Wutian Buddha Lord asked. "The Buddhist doctrine has no ending, and celerity isn't something that I can learn and understand overnight. I'm afraid I will need to go through a long period of perceptive cultivation. At the same time, I will need to coordinate it with other Buddhist doctrines to stand a chance of mastering it," Yi Futian replied. "I see you already understand." Wutian Buddha Lord smiled and nodded. The cultivation of the 6 Buddhist superpowers does indeed require the reinforcement of other Buddhist doctrines to help comprehension. In this world, perhaps only the Lord of all Buddhas have cultivated celerity to mastery. Even I still have a long way to go. Mastery over celerity meant transcending the physical limits of this world. That was indeed nearly impossible. As for time, I suggest you cultivate on the Spirit Mountain for a period of time. Wait until you have reached a certain level in celerity before leaving, Wutian Buddha Lord added. "Thank you very much, Buddha Lord." Yi Futian nodded. That was his plan as well. Chapter 2488, Saint Zhenchan returns. The light of Buddha shone on Spirit Mountain. The surroundings were quiet and peaceful. The entire area was veiled, like a sanctuary. Dazzling colorful light poured down on one of the peaks of Spirit Mountain. A white-haired figure sat cross-legged with his eyes shut as he cultivated. Behind him were 2 other silhouettes sitting quietly and cultivating. Both of them were absolute beauties and appeared even more divine under the light of Buddha. One of the women was actually shrouded in halos of the light of Buddha. She was like a bodhisattva with transcendent beauty. She gave off an immaculate aura. The other woman seemed to be an otherworldly goddess. Their temperaments were completely different. These 2 women were naturally Hua Jiyu and Hua Qingqing. Since Yi Futian had remained to cultivate on Spirit Mountain, he had gone to Western Heaven to bring over Hua Jiyu and the others. Now, Hua Jiyu, Chen Yi as well as a few junior figures were all cultivating on Spirit Mountain. Up until today, they had been cultivating on Spirit Mountain for 3 years. In the past 3 years, Hua Jiyu and the others also read Buddhist scriptures. They did not purposely cultivate the path of Buddha and Buddhist superpowers, but various techniques were related after all. Moreover, Buddhist scriptures were extremely profound. They could be enlightening. Occasionally, some things that they did not comprehend before could suddenly become extremely clear. Hence, these 3 years of cultivation had been extremely beneficial for them. Of course, the person who had improved the most was undoubtedly Hua Qingqing. In her previous life, she had been a Buddhist lamp who had accompanied the Lord of all Buddhas in his cultivation. He had recited many Buddhist scriptures to Qingdeng. This caused Qingdeng to gain sentience in her previous life. Now that memories of her previous life had awakened, the various Buddhas crowned her a Buddha. Her cultivation improved by leaps and bounds every day. She even transcended the original cultivation rules and kept leaping past planes. In another location, Blind Tai was cultivating under a golden waterfall that seemed to be formed from the flowing light of Buddha. At that moment, a silhouette suddenly appeared near him. Blind Tai raised his eyebrows, seemingly sensing something. He turned towards the person who had appeared. However, the next moment, he did not sense anything in that direction. It was as though no one had ever been there. Were his senses playing tricks on him? Blind Tai thought to himself. He felt somewhat strange. By right, his sense would not be mistaken. Then, what was it? In another location, below a pagoda, a few silhouettes were sitting there cultivating. Around them were quite a few Buddhas. These figures were rather young, but their temperaments were astounding. They were Fang Kun and the youths. Just then, a silhouette appeared behind them. The four of them did not sense the figure at all. They were still immersed in their own cultivation. Very quickly, the figure vanished again, as though it had never been there. On the ancient golden peak, an illusory figure appeared where Futian sat today. It was his own illusory figure. Right then, his illusory figure merged back with his original body as he quietly sat there. It was as though he had never left the place and had always been sitting there cultivating. In the surrounding space, one could not even detect any changes in the power of the great path of space. Hua Qingqing, who was seated behind Futian, cast him a glance. Her gaze revealed a faint smile. Right then, Futian also opened his eyes. He gazed down at the scenery below Spirit Mountain and mumbled, as expected, "This celerity superpower is miraculous. I can use it to go about without leaving any traces. Even those with cultivation not weaker than my own have difficulty sensing my presence. If I were to attack them, I would certainly catch them off guard. It is somewhat terrifying to think about it." Hua Qingqing said, "All 6 Buddhist superpowers are all miraculous. When you reach a higher cultivation plane, your celerity will become even more powerful. When that happens, you can go anywhere you want in the world. The heavens and earth will no longer bind you." "Where did you go just now?" Hua Jiyu asked curiously. In their eyes, Futian had only disappeared for an instant before returning to his spot. It was as though he had never left. However, they naturally knew that Futian was cultivating celerity and had gone somewhere in that instant. "I went to many places," replied Futian as he turned around and looked at Hua Jiyu and Hua Qingqing. Hua Jiyu's beautiful eyes revealed a look of surprise. Futian had already gone to many places in that instant. Such speed was considered terrifying. Even if one cultivated the great path of space, it was impossible to pull off such a feat. Right then, a figure suddenly appeared where they were. It was Yumu. Yumu similarly cultivated celerity and could come and go without a trace. Without any signs of the power of the great path of space, he had immediately appeared here. "Master," greeted Futian as he got up and bowed slightly. "Benefactor Yi," replied Yumu as he returned the gesture. "I have something to inform you. Back in Western Heaven, you previously came into conflict with Zhenchan Temple, and Saint Zhenchan went missing after the incident. Not long ago, Saint Zhenchan returned to Zhenchan Temple. He has gotten wind that you are cultivating here on Spirit Mountain and is already on his way over. I believe he will arrive soon." "So he did not die," Futian mumbled. However, this was within expectations. Of course, although he had not killed Saint Zhenchan, he had heavily injured the latter. Saint Zhenchan must have recovered recently for him to have only returned to Zhenchan Temple now. Now, Futian had already settled down on Spirit Mountain. Even though he had yet to establish a base here, he had long left Western Heaven. Despite that, Saint Zhenchan was actually coming to Spirit Mountain to find him. It was obvious how deep his grudge ran. In the battle back then, most of the cultivators of Zhenchan Temple were killed. Only Saint Zhenchan had escaped with severe injuries. Zhenchan Temple was already a shadow of its former self. This resulted in the deep hatred Saint Zhenchan bore against Futian. This score needed to be settled. Saint Zhenchan was also originally from a Buddhist sect. It was not strange for him to come to Spirit Mountain. Of course, benefactor, you need not worry. On Spirit Mountain, it is impossible for Saint Zhenchan to do anything to you, said Yumu, comforting Yi Futian. Yi Futian naturally also understood this. He was a cultivator whom the Lord of all Buddhas had received. The latter had allowed him to cultivate one of the 6 Buddhist superpowers on Spirit Mountain. Under such circumstances, if Saint Zhenchan came to Spirit Mountain to kill Yi Futian, how would the Lord of all Buddhas punish him? Another figure dashed over. This time, it was Bitter Zen. When he arrived, he placed his palms together and bowed towards Hua Qingqing, saying, "Greetings, Buddha." The cultivators of Spirit Mountain still maintained absolute respect towards Hua Qingqing. It was so even for Bitter Zen, who had followed the Lord of all Buddhas. Hua Qingqing was the Buddhist lamp accompanying the Lord of all Buddhas in his cultivation for countless eons. "Greetings, Master Bitter Zen," responded Hua Qingqing as she returned the gesture. Yi Futian similarly greeted him. Bitter Zen looked towards Yi Futian and said, "Saint Zhenchan is already making his way across the ocean. He will arrive at Spirit Mountain soon. However, benefactor, ye may cultivate in peace. On Spirit Mountain, nothing will happen to you." "Many thanks, Master," thanked Yi Futian politely. Master Bitter Zen must have come to put his mind at ease. Even Saint Zhenchan could not do as he pleased on Spirit Mountain. Chapter 2489, Seeking the Buddha. Many Buddhas suddenly appeared on Spirit Mountain. In Western Heaven, Spirit Mountain was the center for those who sought the path of Buddha. Each Buddha had their own cultivation courts, and not all of them cultivated on Spirit Mountain. However, the cultivation courts of the various Buddhas were connected with Spirit Mountain and could easily access the latter. Of course, this was a privilege granted only to Buddhas of very high standing. This time, the various Buddhas came over because they had caught wind of some news. Saint Zhenchan was alive and had returned to Zhenchan Temple. Now, he was heading over to Spirit Mountain to settle the score with Yi Futian. Based on the news they received, back during the battle when Saint Zhenchan led his forces to take down Yi Futian, his forces had been destroyed. The cultivators of Zhenchan Temple had all fallen, and only Saint Zhenchan had escaped. However, he was also gravely injured. He had not appeared in public for several years until he recently returned to Zhenchan Temple. They speculated that, until now, Saint Zhenchan's injuries had yet to fully recover. There would certainly still be some lingering ailments. However, no one would be able to sit still when such grievances had been committed against them. Hence, many Buddhas had come to Spirit Mountain beforehand. They wanted to see how this grudge would end. Yi Futian's group was also waiting there. Not long after, there was a disturbance on Spirit Mountain. Saint Zhenchan had arrived. On the ancient golden peak, Yi Futian could sense many powerful auras landing on him. It was apparent that the various Buddhas were watching him. At the same time, far off in the distance, an extremely terrifying aura swept over the area. A powerful resentment appeared over the sacred lands of the divine Spirit Mountain, faintly disrupting the peaceful environment here. Spirit Mountain was the sacred land of the world of Buddhism. Ordinary people would not dare to act so presumptuously here. However, Saint Zhenchan was originally from a Buddhist sect. His standing was not low, so he dared to act this way. A short while later, Yi Futian and his group saw a silhouette appear before them. Saint Zhenchan stood before the ancient golden peak. His gaze instantly locked on to Yi Futian. He had an ice-cold look in his eyes. The murderous intent in his eyes was clear as day. However, not far in front of Yi Futian, another figure stood. It was Bitter Zen. Next to Yi Futian, Hua Qingqing also stood quietly. Now, Hua Qingqing's position among the Buddhist sects was outstanding. Even Buddha Lord-level figures referred to her as Buddha. "Greetings, Master Bitter Zen," Saint Zhenchan greeted Bitter Zen as he nodded his head slightly. Although he was arrogant, he was still very polite towards the Lord of all Buddha's attendant, not daring to step out of line at the slightest. "Greetings, Saint Zhenchan," replied Bitter Zen as he returned the gesture without an ounce of arrogance. Master Bitter Zen, this man killed many members of Zhenchan Temple a few years ago. Even the deputy lord of Zhenchan Temple fell to his hands. Zhenchan Temple suffered severe losses, and I barely made it out with my life, said Saint Zhenchan. Later on, I heard that this man relied on the name of a Buddhist lamp which reincarnated into a Buddha to cultivate on Spirit Mountain. Hence, I specifically came over here to take a look. I wanted to see how such a man, who stirred up such a huge storm in Six Desires Heaven and slaughtered so many people, could cultivate the path of Buddha. Saint Zhenchan, quell your anger, said Bitter Zen as he placed his palms together and bowed towards Saint Zhenchan. What occurred back then was all because of cause and effect. Saint Zhenchan, you sowed the seeds yourself, so you also had to reap what you sow. Now that you are here, you can cultivate on Spirit Mountain for a period of time to resolve the hostility in your heart with Buddhist doctrine. That way, you might be able to get rid of your obsession. Bitter Zen continued, as for Benefactor Yi, the Lord of all Buddhas has arranged for him to cultivate on Spirit Mountain. It is because this is Benefactor Yi's fate with Buddha. Bitter Zen directly stated that this was arranged by the Lord of all Buddhas. The latter was the leader of the world of Buddhism. Nothing in Western heaven could escape his eyes. He naturally knew what had happened back then. Bitter Zen did not need to say more. Saint Zhenchan should be able to read between the lines. Saint Zhenchan naturally understood what he meant. Bitter Zen stated that Yi Futian had done no wrong and that he should reflect on his actions while studying Buddhist scriptures. He was a Buddhist, but he had always been occupied with establishing his own force. His relationship with the Buddhist sects was not that close. However, his elder brother, Tongchan, was a top Buddha lord. All right. Since the Lord of all Buddhas has arranged it, I will not do anything. However, away from Spirit Mountain, this personal vendetta still stands. I beg the forgiveness of the Lord of all Buddhas in advance, declared Saint Zhenchan. His tone was not polite at all. The Buddhist sects were different from sects in other worlds. In other worlds, the underlings were subordinate to the great emperor-level figures. None of them would dare act so presumptuously to their superiors. However, the Lord of all Buddhas was merciful and did not interfere with worldly matters. Everything obeyed the laws of causality and fate. He would not force anything to happen nor interfere with it happening. Beyond Spirit Mountain, the Lord of all Buddhas would not meddle in worldly affairs. Also, the law enforcers of the world of Buddhism did not look kindly on Yi Futian. Zhenchan, you overstep your bounds, a voice called out. Saint Zhenchan turned around and saw a Buddha appear. It was Tongchan Buddha Lord. Tongchan Buddha Lord, Saint Zhenchan, and Lord Initial Zen were all under the same master. Back in the day, they had all cultivated under the same ancient Buddha. However, each of them chose their own cultivation path, and they weren't that close. Tongchan Buddha Lord was of very high standing. Be it Saint Zhenchan or Lord Initial Zen, neither of them was worthy of his attention. Nevertheless, Tongchan Buddha Lord did not have a good impression of Yi Futian either. After all, they were still from the same sect. Initial Zen was killed by Yi Futian. Zhenchan had nearly perished as well. Forgive me, elder brother, said Saint Zhenchan as he bowed towards Tongchan Buddha Lord. He appeared extremely polite. They did not seem like ordinary brothers. Tongchan Buddha Lord cast a glance at him and said, I know why you have come. You have yet to recover from your injuries. You wish to head to Vidurya Pure World, yes? Elder brother, please help me, Saint Zhenchan replied with a bow. He naturally could not hide this from Tongchan Buddha Lord as the latter could read the minds of others. Vidurya Pure World was an independent world in the world of Buddhism. The master of Vidurya Pure World was an ancient Buddha, Medicine Buddha Lord. Medicine Buddha Lord was revered. Even the Lord of all Buddhas would be very polite towards him. He could be considered a true relic of the world of Buddhism. He rarely appeared in public, not even appearing during All Buddha's Fest. Only a few of his disciples had attended the festival. Although Saint Zhenchan's cultivation was powerful and his position in the world of Buddhism was high, Vidurya Pure World was still not a place that he could visit as he pleased. he still needed the help of Tongchan Buddha Lord to get there. On Spirit Mountain, there was a passageway that led to Vidurya Pure World. He has yet to recover from his injuries and wishes to see Medicine Buddha Lord, who Qingqing told Yi Futian over transmitted thoughts. These past few years, Yi Futian had developed a greater understanding about the top figures in the world of Buddhism. Medicine Buddha Lord was considered a legendary existence, a true ancient Buddha. From the looks of it, Saint Xunchan had yet to recover from his injuries back then. Hence, he wanted to head over to Vidurya Pure World to seek treatment from Medicine Buddha Lord. "All right, I will help you. However, whether or not Medicine Buddha Lord is willing to treat you is up to your fate," replied Tongchan Buddha Lord in an indifferent tone. "Elder brother, thank you for your help," Saint Xunchan responded with a bow. "Follow me," Tongchan Buddha Lord instructed. Saint Xunchan stepped forward and followed him. Before he left, he did not forget to turn around and sweep a glance at Yi Futian. "Over transmitted thoughts," he said, "now that you no longer have the divine body, even if you have cultivated Buddhist doctrine on Spirit Mountain, what can you do? You'd better pray that you'll make it out of Western Heaven alive." Chapter 2490, Years Old. Yi Futian watched as Saint Xunchan left. His expression was calm. After the other party left, he said, "It appears that I am not the main reason why Saint Xunchan came to Spirit Mountain." The various Buddhas also realized this. It turned out that Saint Xunchan had come to Spirit Mountain to meet Medicine Buddha Lord. It seemed that his injuries were very severe. With his cultivation, it might be that he couldn't recover from it on his own. Hence, he needed the aid of Medicine Buddha Lord. "Still, you should be careful," mumbled Chen Yi as he walked up next to Yi Futian. Yi Futian nodded his head. Saint Xunchan's threat was still ringing in his ears. Saint Xunchan's main reason for coming here was to seek treatment. His secondary goal was to deal with Yi Futian. As long as he had the opportunity, Saint Xunchan would naturally not let Yi Futian go. The grudge between them was established, and not just in Western Heaven. Most likely, even if Yi Futian returned to the Divine Prefecture, Saint Xunchan would not let him escape. After all, without the divine body, Yi Futian couldn't go against Saint Xunchan. Spirit Mountain is a place for quiet cultivation. "Everyone, please return to your own cultivation courts," said Bitter Zen as he walked up before the ancient peak and bowed into the distance with his palms placed together. Although there was no one before him, in reality, the various Buddhas were all looking to where he was. He was asking the various Buddhas to leave. Very soon, the Buddhas retracted their auras. Seeing that the incident had been resolved so easily, they naturally did not see the need to remain here. All of them left one after another. "Benefactor Yi, you may continue cultivating in peace," Bitter Zen said as he turned to face Yi Futian. "Many thanks, Master," replied Yi Futian as he bowed back at Bitter Zen. Bitter Zen and Yumu then bid farewell and left. Chen Yi walked up beside Yi Futian and asked, "What do you plan to do now?" Yi Futian was marked by Saint Xunchan. If he remained in Western Heaven, he needed to be on his guard at all times. If he took the opportunity to leave now, he might be able to return to the Divine Prefecture before Saint Xunchan recovered from his injuries. Yi Futian replied, "Since Saint Xunchan wants to kill me, he probably won't let this opportunity slip past him so easily. If I leave, we might be stalked. After all, Saint Xunchan should be well aware that if Yi Futian returned to the Divine Prefecture, it wouldn't be as easy to kill him there as it was in Western Heaven. If Yi Futian were in Saint Xunchan's shoes, he would have arranged for Yi Futian to be stalked." "So, you plan to continue cultivating in Western Heaven?" Chen Yi further inquired. Responded Yi Futian as he nodded his head. He would first reach the 9th tier of the Renhuang Plain. Even if he returned to the Divine Prefecture, his main goal would still be to continue cultivating. It was a rare fateful encounter for him to be able to cultivate on Spirit Mountain. Aside from cultivating celerity, his aim was to reach the final tier of the Renhuang Plain. That way, when he returned to the Divine Prefecture, he could do as he pleased and need not be restricted by others. "All right," answered Chen Yi as he nodded his head. Spirit Mountain was indeed very suitable for cultivating. After they made their decision, Their group continued cultivating here. The peaceful mountain seemed to make them forget the flow of time. In the blink of an eye, Futian welcomed his 100th year of life. Before the ancient peak, Futian gazed at the golden sea of clouds. Hua Jiyu sat beside him, accompanying him in silence. "It has been 100 years, whispered Hua Jiyu with a smile. Both of them were the same age. They were now 100 years old. 100 years passed by in a flash, replied Futian as he smiled. He recalled the time when they had met in Qingju Academy in the city of Qingju. It felt like a dream that had lasted for decades. Although it passed in a flash, we have also changed greatly since then, said Hua Jiyu with a smile. The times they spent during their youth in the city of Qingju were so happy. Everything had changed since then. They also never imagined that they would spend their 100th year alive on Spirit Mountain, the holy land of Western Heaven. Although we have changed, in the end, we are still together, said Futian in a gentle tone as he hugged Hua Jiyu. Ever since they knew each other, they had been apart longer than they had been together. Fortunately, they were still a couple. They would remain together forever. Responded Hua Jiyu as she nodded her head gently. She leaned into Futian's embrace and closed her eyes. She did not move, seemingly quietly falling asleep. After looking at his lover in his embrace, Futian gazed out to the golden sea of clouds. It was as beautiful as a dream. During his first 100 years of cultivation, he had pursued the peak of the Renhuang Plain. For the next 100 years, he would aim for the peak of cultivation. He also closed his eyes and enjoyed the peace and quiet of the moment. In the distance, Hua Qingqing's beautiful gaze revealed a faint smile as she watched this peaceful scene. She turned around and did not disturb them. She then saw Fang Kun and the others peeping. When they saw Hua Qingqing smiling at them, they quickly scurried away. No one disturbed Futian and Hua Jiyu from enjoying their time together. They watched as the two of them enjoyed this peace that was hard to come by. The golden sea of clouds shone with the light of Buddha. The clouds kept shifting. Waves of rainbow light shone down on Futian and Hua Jiyu. The scene was like a painting. It was a peaceful sight to behold. This scene lasted for a long while. They seemed detached from the world around them. No matter how the golden clouds shifted, they did not move at all. They seemed to have entered a state of meditative consciousness. A few days later, Hua Qingqing, Chen Yi, and the others looked at the two of them from afar. Someone asked in a low voice, "What's going on?" "They are one with nature. They merge with the heavens and the earth," Hua Qingqing explained softly. This is what happens when someone enters the state of meditative consciousness. When a cultivator enters into this state, it's easier for them to achieve enlightenment. Perhaps, this is a fateful encounter for them. Chen Yi nodded in agreement. The changes in the sea of clouds intensified as the clouds shifted frenziedly. They could faintly sense an aura of the great path flowing in the sky. This caused Chen Yi and Hua Qingqing to reveal a surprised expression. This was a sign. Who was about to break through to the next plane? Was it Futian? Or was it Hua Jiyu? There were howling winds and churning clouds in the sky above Spirit Mountain. A terrifying aura flowed in the air. The golden light of Buddha dispersed, and dull thundering sounds could be heard. The sacred space was covered with a layer of haze. The aura was menacing, causing people's hearts to tremble in fear. "It's a divine tribulation," Chen Yi mumbled as a glint of surprise flashed past in his eyes. The person who was about to experience a breakthrough was Hua Jiyu. If Futian were experiencing a breakthrough, he would advance to the 9th tier of the Renhuang Plain. There would not be any divine tribulation involved. Only if Hua Jiyu faced a breakthrough would the divine tribulation of the Great Path occur. Futian sensed something. He opened his eyes and took a look at the sky. Joy flashed past his eyes. Hua Jiyu, who was in his embrace, similarly opened her eyes. They looked at each other and smiled. Then, she left his arms. Clearly, both of them were well aware of what was going to happen. Futian thought to himself. He did not expect Jiyu to be the first of them to experience the divine tribulation of the Great Path. However, After recalling Hua Jiyu's experience and fateful encounters, he felt that her advancement was natural. Hua Jiyu had a deeper understanding of the teachings of the great emperor compared to him. Back when she returned to his side in the divine prefecture, she was already at the peak of the Renhuang plain. Hua Jiyu stepped forward and marched towards the sea of clouds. "Be careful," reminded Yi Futian softly. He had witnessed how Emperor Shi experienced his divine tribulation. The process was perilous. Hua Jiyu smiled and nodded her head. She seemed unworried about it. Chen Yi and Hua Qingqing approached them. Blind Tai, Fang Kun, and the rest joined them too. All of them watched as Hua Jiyu walked towards the sea of clouds. Countless people exhausted their lives wanting to experience the divine tribulation and advance to the next level. Yet, they couldn't achieve their goal. Who would have thought that Hua Jiyu had actually managed to do so after having an enlightenment? "Why haven't you broken through to the next plane?" Chen Yi asked Yi Futian. "Right. Even Masteress is undergoing the divine tribulation of the Great Path. Yet Master has yet to advance to the next plane," said Fang Kun with a smile. He was teasing his master. Yi Futian revealed a pondering look. Before this, when he was in the state of meditative consciousness, he felt that he had entered into a miraculous realm. With his current ability, he should be able to break through to the next plane. However, he seemed to encounter some hindrance that prohibited him from doing so. Up until now, he had yet to get to the bottom of this problem. Chapter 2491, Tribulation. However, right now, Yi Futian was not in the mood to think about breaking through to the next plane. He was somewhat worried. Although Hua Jiyu undergoing a tribulation was a good thing, in a sense, doing so was not truly breaking through to the next plane. The current heavenly law did not allow Renhuangs with flawless great paths to continue advancing. Hence, the tribulation of law descended upon them when they attempted to do so. It was extremely dangerous. Conversely, when cultivators without flawless great paths advanced, that was considered truly breaking through to the next plane. They merged with the heavenly law and were even called fake emperors. Yet, in reality, they were far inferior to great emperors. Great emperor-level figures were existences akin to deities in ancient times. Fake emperors could not compare to them. Ordinary fake emperors would have difficulty defeating even a 9th-tier Renhuang with a flawless great path. Back when the original realm went through the crisis, many 9th-tier Renhuangs descended from the divine prefecture. Figures from the original realm at the level of Lord Taishian could not hold a candle to them. The gap between their levels of power was apparent. Yi Futian had witnessed Emperor Shi undergoing his tribulation on Turtle Deity Island. Even with Emperor Shi's ability back then, it was difficult for him to withstand the power of the tribulation, especially the Sword of Law which appeared at the end. Emperor Shi was nearly killed by the Sword of Law. The Black Turtle of Turtle Deity Island appeared in the nick of time and took the terrifying slash on behalf of Emperor Shi. Only then did he manage to pass the divine tribulation of the Great Path. Of course, Hua Jiyu was different. In Yi Futian's opinion, Hua Jiyu was not any weaker than Emperor Shi of the past. She was a successor of a great emperor. Moreover, she had a deep understanding of the teachings she received. She also improved a lot while cultivating on Spirit Mountain these past few years. Her comprehension of Buddhist doctrine greatly aided her in her cultivation. Exactly because of the reasons above, Hua Jiyu had this opportunity to break through the shackles of her current plane. Therefore, even though Yi Futian was slightly worried about her, he was not afraid. Deep down, he believed that Hua Jiyu could succeed in this divine tribulation of the Great Path. It was just that there was still some risk. The two of them were very close. It was normal for Yi Futian to be worried for her. More and more menacing phenomena appeared in the sky above Spirit Mountain. The light of catastrophe gathered, churned, and roared. It penetrated the light of Buddha, which hovered over Spirit Mountain. Great Buddha-level figures appeared, followed by the sound of Buddha reverberating in the heavens and the earth. Then, the light of Buddha enveloped Spirit Mountain, shielding the entire mountain with a layer of golden shimmer. This caused it not to be harmed by the divine tribulation. Otherwise, Spirit Mountain would be perforated with holes under the power of the divine tribulation. Hua Jiyu stood at the center of the storm. Her entire body was shining. She was as divine and beautiful as a goddess. The light of catastrophe that gathered penetrated the space. It was as though the end days had arrived and overshadowed the peaceful divinity of Spirit Mountain. Even though Spirit Mountain was enveloped in defensive power, an intense rumbling could be felt on it now. It's unexpected for a cultivator who hasn't cultivated Buddhist superpowers to undergo a tribulation on Spirit Mountain. This is interesting, commented a great Buddha while smiling. Right. This is the first time something like this has occurred, a Buddha responded. At this moment, many divine swords appeared around Hua Jiyu. All the divine swords were wheezing angrily as they surrounded her. They formed an unlimited domain with her in the center. The light of catastrophe rained down. The tribulation descended on Hua Jiyu. Hua Jiyu cast a glance at the sky. She was not afraid at all. She pointed a finger upwards. Immediately, countless divine swords appeared and collided head-on with the tribulation. Most of the light of catastrophe was eliminated. However, even so, there was still a myriad of light of catastrophe that landed on her. The light circulated around her body. On the ancient peak, Futian and the others were somewhat nervous. Little Ling held her breath as her crystal-clear eyes stared at the silhouette before her. In her head, she prayed, "Masteress will surely be all right. Rest your worries. There are many great Buddhas on Spirit Mountain. If something were to happen, they could take the divine tribulation of the Great Path head-on," Hua Qingqing said softly to Futian. Futian nodded in agreement. Even though the tribulation was powerful, it was a form of power after all. True top existences could intervene in the power of the tribulation. However, if the situation escalated to that point, Hua Jiyu's cultivation would be affected too. Futian naturally wouldn't want to see that happen. In the sky above, the light of catastrophe stretched for tens of thousands of miles. The horrifying phenomenon caused people's hearts to tremble. Even at his current level, Futian still felt somewhat terrified by it. He believed that if this tribulation were targeted at him, he would feel threatened too. One could imagine the intensity of the attack Hua Jiyu was withstanding now. The heavens shook, and the power of the tribulation constantly descended. Hua Jiyu's clothes fluttered about, and her long, jet-black hair danced frenziedly in the wind. Her entire body seemed to become a divine body as she resisted the corrosion of the power of the tribulation. As time passed, the power of the tribulation showed no signs of weakening at all. Rumble. An even more frightening aura coalesced in the sky. Futian felt that it was somewhat familiar. It was similar to the final attack that Emperor Shi withstood back then. The heavenly law was delivering its punishment, Futian thought to himself. Last time, Emperor Shi had to withstand the sword of law. It was an extremely overbearing and sharp punishment. What would Hua Jiyu be facing? Each cultivator would experience a different power of law. The sword of law was a tribulation of law that had extremely overbearing attack power. What kind of power would Hua Jiyu experience? Futian looked up at the sky above. Endless light of catastrophe gathered together. A face faintly appeared over where the light gathered. It seemed to be the face of a woman. It was majestic and domineering. It was filled with endless authority. An astonishing storm of will appeared in the heavens above. The power of law emanated from this storm. Futian and the others felt an intense threat against their spiritual souls. It is the will of the law. It is a psychic attack of will, a Buddha commented as he looked at the face forming in the storm in the sky. Another Buddha commented, "This attack is extremely dangerous." However, for the will of the law to appear when she is undergoing the tribulation means that her psychic abilities are extremely powerful. She is impressive. Rumble. A dull thud could be heard. At that moment, it was as though the entire world fell silent. On Spirit Mountain, many cultivators felt as though their heads were about to explode. Their wills were collapsing, and their spiritual souls were about to shatter. This was especially so for people with low cultivation, such as Fang Kun and the others. They held their heads in their hands as they felt a pang of pain. This power had not even attacked them yet. Futian also sensed a terrifyingly powerful attack. It made his thoughts freeze for a brief moment. However, in just a split second, everything seemed to have ended. When he regained his senses, he saw Hua Jiyu's figure trembling slightly as she stood there. She seemed off balance. His figure dashed over and immediately appeared behind Hua Jiyu as he caught her. Hua Jiyu looked a little frail as she leaned on Futian. However, she had a smile on her face. She raised her head and looked at Futian, saying, "This is the first tribulation. Most likely, she would be capable enough to protect Futian after she experienced the second tribulation." Many of Futian's enemies were cultivators who had undergone the first tribulation. Futian nodded and said, "This is the first tribulation." His eyes glistened with tenderness. He naturally understood why Hua Jiyu trained so hard. She did so because of him. Futian himself also had to break through to the next plane as soon as possible. Chapter 2492. Unable to break through his level? Atop Spirit Mountain, the tribulation clouds dissipated into the skies. As Buddhist light shrouded the glory of Spirit Mountain, everything returned to normal. It was as if everything before this had not happened at all. The Buddhas also left one after another. This incident today was considered rather unusual even for them. There had never been an outsider who came here to overcome the divine tribulations of the Great Path. Futian brought Hua Jiyu to sit on the ancient mountain. The power of the Great Path of Life encased her and rejuvenated her vitality, causing her body to regenerate quickly. Hua Jiyu was sitting cross-legged as she stabilized her cultivation levels. Overcoming the divine tribulations depleted a great amount of her spiritual energy. Back then, Emperor, she only managed to withstand this divine tribulation by sacrificing the life of the black tortoise while she powered through it with just her own body. Furthermore, in the end, Hua Jiyu was faced with a direct attack on her spiritual power by the will of the law, besieging her spiritual soul. It's not difficult to imagine how terrifying of an attack it was. It was even more dangerous than the Sword of Law. As Blind Tai and Chen Yi left quietly, Fang Kun and the others left as well. No one wanted to disturb Futian and Hua Jiyu's cultivation. After seeing Hua Jiyu overcome the divine tribulation of the Great Path, they all felt that they should work hard too, so as not to hold them back. Other than them, the golden-winged giant pengbird was also cultivating earnestly. Although he was once the student of Great Elder Mortian, he'd never had the chance to cultivate at Spirit Mountain. This was an opportunity for him, and he was trying his best to seize it, even going to listen to the great Buddhas on Spirit Mountain teach Buddhist scripture. Spirit Mountain was the cultivation ground of the Lord of all Buddhas and the place where various Buddhas sought their paths. Other than the top great Buddhas from their respective regions, there was a significant number of great Buddhas who studied under Buddha elders cultivating at the Spirit Mountain, and they also held Buddhist scripture lectures. The golden-winged great peng bird Mo Yunzi frequently listened to these great Buddhas' lessons on scripture. As time passed, Futian's group continued to strive and cultivate on the Spirit Mountain, and each of their cultivation levels increased by the day. Several years later, Chen Yi had perfected his great path, and his powers evolved after reaching the 9th level of the Renhuang Plain. Even Blind Tai could no longer fight him. The two had sparred on the Spirit Mountain. Although Blind Tai also received the inheritance of the Imperial Star at the Starry Cultivation Court, he still couldn't compare to Chen Yi. After all, Chen Yi received the inheritance from the Bright Temple. Furthermore, he himself was the divine body of light and was born with extraordinary potential. Blind Chen was even willing to die for him to inherit the power of the light. Back then, at the Donghua domain, Chen Yi could already fight against Futian. Now, he was far more powerful than back then, so much so that it would be difficult to even make an accurate comparison. On the other hand, for the past few years, Futian felt the most troubled. Somehow, his cultivation was still stuck at the 8th level Renhuang Plain, and he had made no breakthrough. This made him feel rather uncanny, as he couldn't understand why and couldn't find any reason. At this time, many monks sat before a statue of a Buddha on Spirit Mountain. They were all sitting on zafus and listening in silence. Below the statue of the Buddha, a great Buddha was giving a lecture about Buddhist scripture. This great Buddha was a Buddha in Spirit Mountain and had a deep understanding of the Buddhist doctrine. Yi Futian came to know many of the Buddhist cultivators atop the Spirit Mountains. He was also sitting below, listening to the lecture. After some time, the lecture ended. Many Buddhist cultivators started raising questions regarding the scripture, and the great Buddha helped to clarify their doubts one by one. The Buddhas only dispersed when there was no one else asking any more questions. However, Yi Futian sat quietly in his place and didn't leave. "Benefactor Yi, what's the matter?" This great Buddha smiled and asked Yi Futian. He was the Vajra Buddha Lord of the Spirit Mountain and had the deepest understanding of the Vajra Sutra. He was also extremely well versed in the Vajra spell, which Yi Futian learned and cultivated. "I do have something which I wish to seek your advice about, Great Buddha," Yi Futian said. "Please, tell me," Vajra Buddha Lord said with a smile. "Is it true that Buddhist cultivators could forge the divine wheel with their Buddha pure bodies?" Yi Futian asked. "Yes indeed," the Vajra Buddha Lord nodded. "In fact, some Buddha pure bodies are the divine wheel of the great paths. There is no difference. The strength of their Buddha pure bodies is the strength of their divine wheels. The level of their Buddha pure bodies would be the level of their divine wheels, and by extension the plane of cultivation of the Buddhist cultivator," Yi Futian said. Vajra Buddha Lord nodded. He couldn't quite understand what Yi Futian was trying to ask. Are there any Buddhist cultivators who have cultivated their Buddha pure bodies to the 9th plane of the Buddhist path, but their actual cultivation planes lagged behind? Yi Futian continued asking. Vajra Buddha Lord answered, "No, you are a cultivator yourself, so of course you understand that the level of one's divine wheel of the great path is equivalent to his cultivation plane. Having any of one's divine wheel of the great path reach the 9th level is the same as reaching the 9th level of the Renhuang plane himself. There are no exceptions?" Yi Futian asked. "No exceptions." Vajra Buddha Lord shook his head. "Thank you, Buddha Lord, for clearing up my queries." Yi Futian put his palms together and bowed. He then excused himself to leave the place. He turned and walked a few steps before his figure just disappeared into thin air. It was as if he had teleported somewhere else. The next instant, he directly appeared at his cultivation place on the ancient peak. "How was it?" Huajiri walked to him and asked. Yi Futian shook his head and said, "I think the Buddha Lord doesn't know as well. I guess we'll have to just wait for a while and see." Huajiu nodded. "I'll cultivate first," Yi Futian said. Then, he closed his eyes and sat cross-legged while his consciousness sank into the Life Palace. Inside the Life Palace, it was as though this was an entirely independent world. The world tree swayed gently as various powers of the great path circled it. The sun and moon hung in the sky, and celestial stars shone magnificently. It looked like a real world. The projection of Yi Futian's consciousness sat before the divine tree. With just a thought, powers of the great path started to conjure and materialize, turning into a divine wheel of the great path. Once the divine wheel of divine elephant appeared, an immense aura of the great path started to emanate from it. Then the Guqin divine will appeared as well, while enormous Buddha pure bodies of the Buddhist path materialized behind him. The auras of all of these great paths were tremendously powerful. All of them had reached the 9th level. After cultivating on the Spirit Mountains for many years, he completed his great paths and continuously augmented his great path divine wheels. Now, all of these divine wheels had entered the 9th level one after another, so he should have entered the 9th level Renhuang plane as well. Yet, he had not sensed a breakthrough at all and continued to stay at the 8th level. Based on the categorization of cultivation planes, as Vajra Buddha Lord said, once the divine will entered the 9th level, then the cultivator himself would enter the 9th level as well. Based on that, of course, he would be considered a 9th level cultivator. However, he didn't feel that he had broken through the 8th plane. Especially when he released his great path aura, Huajiu also felt that he was still at the 8th plane. This seemed to run contrary to common sense and wasn't congruent to the rules of cultivation. The only possible explanation was that these divine wheels that have broken through to the 9th level were all derived and forged from the life spirits. And these life spirits are essentially nothingness in the first place and could only appear by relying on the world tree. Only the world tree could be truly considered his natal spirit. In some sense, it could even be regarded as the only one. So, could his cultivation level be related to that? Yi Futian closed his eyes, fully focusing on cultivating and perceiving the great path. By now, the only divine wheel that hadn't made the breakthrough was the boundary wheel, which was derived from the world tree. Perhaps that was the reason why he didn't sense the opportunity to break through the 8th level. However, all of his great path powers had reached 9th level strength, and they were all unified as one, so why was he unable to take this final step? This was the part that he couldn't find the answer to. Chapter 2493, A New Path. Inside the Life Palace, the projection of Yi Futian's consciousness stood before the world tree of his natal soul. He seemed to be pondering something. Since he started cultivating, nearly everything revolved around his world tree. By meditating about it, he derived the other sublife souls. This was only possible with the world tree because this natal soul could accommodate any and everything in this world and provide endless energy for him. For instance, if he devoured the extreme powers of the yin or yang, he could extract them and convert them into his own power. The world tree absorbed all powers in the world, but it also reciprocated Yi Futian with the purest of great path powers. Looking back, without the world tree of his natal soul, none of the other things could have existed. This world tree was a divine tree, and all other life souls and great path powers were the fruits born on this divine tree. Perhaps that was the reason why even though his other great paths were all nearing perfection and had reached the 9th level, he still wasn't able to actually break through the 8th level. The root cause of all this was because his world tree hadn't evolved to perfection yet. So, what should he do to take this next step and let the world tree transform in order to break through the shackles of his cultivation level? In Yi Futian's impression, he had cultivated for many years. Today, he was more than 100 years old, but this was only the second time that he actually met a bottleneck in his road of cultivation. And this time, it could be a crucial hurdle deciding the rest of his fate. If he couldn't step over it, his road of cultivation could stop here. Actually, Yi Futian was considered rather lucky. There were so many phenomenal individuals from past to present, every single one of them met all kinds of hindrances and setbacks on their roads of cultivation. On the other hand, Yi Futian's cultivation journey could definitely be said to be smooth sailing. Hua Jiyu was able to make the breakthrough in cultivation before him. However, Hua Jiyu was reborn after death and was lucky to be alive. In some sense, she was no longer the Hua Jiyu from before. She was imbued with the attributes of the Empress and fused with countless incarnations before becoming the person she was today. But Yi Futian was different, as he was still himself in the purest way possible. As the world tree swayed gently, auras of the great paths in various colors flowed around it. Each color seemed to represent a different great path power: Gungjin, Yin, Yang, Life, Lightning, etc. Various great paths, all nearing perfection. They circled the world tree and caused the tree to rustle. It was as though that was its eternal state. Yi Futian pondered, but after much time, he still couldn't fully fathom it. Several months had passed since he sat down. Atop the ancient peak, Yi Futian once again entered the state of meditative consciousness. When he woke up, he appeared extraordinarily tranquil. As the Buddhist light shone on him and the breeze brushed past him, Yi Futian reached out his hand. It was as though he could touch the powers existing throughout the world. The higher the cultivation level, the more one could sense that everything in this world could be used. Yi Futian pointed toward the sky and started to carve characters into thin air. His strokes were carved directly into the void, clear as they could be. These characters contained the power of the path. Below the ancient peak, Blind Tai raised his head slightly to face toward the sky. He could sense the powerful will of the path. From afar, Fang Kun and the others also raised their heads in that direction, and he said, "Is that character carved by Master? It looks like Master's cultivation level had already reached the 9th level, but why didn't he sense the breakthrough?" Hua Jiyu and Hua Qingqing walked to the back of Yi Futian. Yi Futian stared into that character, then, he sighed. With a wave of his hand, the word path disappeared from the sky. Your path has already reached the 9th level, and it far surpasses normal 9th level cultivators, Hua Qingqing said softly. She had restored the memories from her previous life and was now extraordinary in every sense of the word. Naturally, she could sense that very clearly. Yi Futian's power of the Great Path was already very powerful, it was definitely not at the 8th level. When Hua Jiyu heard Yi Futian's sigh, she had already understood that Yi Futian still couldn't solve the conundrum. He was trapped within it and couldn't see through it. She walked to the side of Yi Futian. Her pretty eyes looked toward him and smiled gently without saying anything. This smile was the best consolation for Yi Futian. Jiyu, Yi Futian held her hand, I still can't do it. With your learning capacity, there's no way that you can't make the breakthrough. Since the others and I had done it, of course, you can too. Perhaps you haven't understood it fully yet because the path you will take is different from everyone else's. And because of that, this is happening. If your path were as easy as the others, then that would not be you. Hua Jiyu's voice was gentle and tender, perhaps because she also sensed the tinge of frustration in Yi Futian's heart. After all, anyone would be frustrated when faced with such circumstances. Because he was unable to see through it, he couldn't find the path before him, he couldn't even understand it. He was different from everyone else. Millimeter. Yi Futian nodded. He actually had the same feeling as well. He turned to look at Hua Qingqing and said, this is indeed the path might of a 9th level cultivator, yet I still can't make the breakthrough. After all, I still have some ways to go in my understanding. Back then when the Buddha cultivated the Buddhist doctrine, there were ones which he had spent more than 100 years studying yet still failed to understand. One day when he woke up from sleep, and he had an epiphany. It was as though the cloudy skies had cleared out, suddenly allowing him to see the sun. Hua Qingqing continued, moreover, this happened more than once. The Buddha elder often studied Buddhist scriptures thousands of times, even copying and dictating them tens of thousands of times, over and over again. Yet, he still couldn't fully understand it. But one day, he just suddenly got it, and the rest is history. Yi Futian seemed to come to a revelation after hearing what Hua Qingqing said. He smiled helplessly. That's indeed how cultivation is, a build-up to one point of completion. Perhaps this is happening because I haven't had any bottlenecks before this. Of course, the difference between the Buddha elder and me is that I don't have too much time. He's not concerned about being stuck at his current level forever. In the first place, there was no such thing as eternity. If he couldn't do it in 1 year, how about 10? If he couldn't do it in 10, how about 100? Back then, the Buddha elder poured his heart and soul into cultivating the Buddhist doctrine. He cared about nothing else, which was why he was known as the ancient Buddha Qingdeng. Yi Futian respected such a state of mind, but his circumstance was different. The great paths are interconnected, and all laws in the world have something common among them. If you feel frustrated from cultivation, you can try studying Buddhist scripture. Perhaps it will give you a change of pace. Hua Qingqing smiled and said. There's no need to cultivate the most powerful Buddhist superpowers, all you need to do is to read the Buddhist scriptures, calm your heart, and focus your mind. Yi Futian looked toward Hua Qingqing. She was definitely different from before. She had become wiser. After all, she was the Buddhist lamp that accompanied the Buddha elder for years in cultivation. After years of listening to the Buddha elder's lessons on scripture, she naturally gained great wisdom. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to awaken intellect. I'll try it out, Yi Futian said as he nodded. Perhaps it would work. At the very least, it could calm his heart. As a matter of fact, over the past few days, his state of mind wasn't as composed as before. I'll accompany you, Hua Jiyu said with a smile. All right. Yi Futian nodded. Then, he walked down the ancient peak together with Hua Jiyu and off into another direction. Hopefully, reaching scriptures would be useful for him in finding a way to make the breakthrough. Chapter 2494, A Phantom, or a Dream. Yi Futian stopped cultivating in retreat and began to comprehend the Buddhist scriptures. In Spirit Mountain, this holy land of Buddhism, he went to the library every day to read and study Buddhist scriptures. Sometimes, he would also listen to the preaching of other great Buddhas. He didn't even obsess about cultivation anymore and didn't deliberately cling on to the goal of breaking the realm. The study of Buddhist scriptures could indeed quiet a person's mind and allow the person to enter into a wonderful state of mind that was free from any distraction. As Hua Qingqing said, during the Buddha's cultivation once upon a time, sometimes some Buddhist scriptures that could not be understood for hundreds of years would suddenly become so apparent that enlightenment was obtained in a day. Perhaps one day, he would be able to do the same. Time flew by, and it had been more than 10 years since Futian arrived in the Western world. During this time, many stories had taken place in the land of the Divine Prefecture and the land of the original realm, but none of them had anything to do with him. Back then, he was public enemy number 1 in the Divine Prefecture, with many people wanting to kill him. He had no choice but to seal himself inside Ziwei Segmentum. He could not step outside of it. Afterward, while delivering Hua Qingqing to the Western world, he also came for the trials. No matter what happened in the outside world, the Ziwei Segmentum remained the same, becoming a world contained within itself. It had almost cut off all contact with the outside world. This was also a strategy to protect itself in times of turmoil. Here, he was devoted to cultivating and aimed to improve himself as quickly as possible. If he could not elevate his cultivation level, there would be no point for him to return, as he would still be unable to move around at will. Also, there would be nothing but dead ends for him, just the same as before. Donghuang the Great had personally intervened, and the teacher had negotiated for his safety. Since Donghuang the Great did not personally pursue the matter with him, it was precisely for this reason that the teacher would have no way to interfere in the future. Now, everything was dependent on himself. On this day, Futian was reading the scriptures in the library. He was focused and studied in earnest. Not far away, there was a slight rustling noise. Someone was sweeping in the library. Futian didn't pay any attention to it and continued to immerse himself in his own little world. It was not until the monk sweeping in the library walked next to Futian that Futian became aware of his presence. He sat there and looked up with a smile. Grandmaster Bitter Zen. This monk was actually a caretaker by the name of Bitter Zen. Futian had discovered over the years that even though he was already a great Buddha himself and respected by all, Bitter Zen was still responsible for the menial tasks on Spirit Mountain. Benefactor Yi has been hard at work in the study of the scriptures these past years. Have you found any insights? Bitter Zen smiled and inquired, his right hand raised in front of his forehead as a sign of courtesy. The Buddhist scriptures are extensive and profound. Many concepts are obscure and difficult to understand. Although I have read it, it is difficult to truly comprehend, Futian responded with a smile. Among them, the most immediate thought is that while Buddhists cultivated in Buddhism, very few of them have mentioned the cultivation of the way. Are Buddhist methods and the Great Path one and the same? What is the way? Bitter Zen asked. The sun and the moon shine with no one to light them, the stars follow their own patterns with no one to arrange them, animals self-produce with no one to create them, the wind blows with no one to fan it, water flows with no one to push it, plants grow with no one to tend them. The way is rule and order. It is the foundation of all things, Futian responded. What Benefactor Yi said is all true. Therefore, people in the world are in constant contact with the way at all times, and everything is regulated by the way. If so, why does one need to cultivate? Bitter Zen asked. Futian's brows furrowed. He said with a smile, the Grandmaster's question has confounded me. Is the way tangible or intangible? The sun, the moon, and the stars are all considered the way, just like the wind, the fire, the thunder, and the lightning are the way. However, why do you think a cultivator can create all these phenomena directly? Bitter Zen asked again. Futian appeared thoughtful for a moment. He then looked at Bitter Zen and asked, Grandmaster, please elucidate. Amitabha. Bitter Zen clasped his hands together and replied, how can little monk truly understand the truth of the world? Perhaps this is what they mean by form is emptiness and emptiness is form. Form itself is emptiness, and emptiness itself is form. Futian murmured, and there seemed to be Buddhist scriptures, which had imprinted themselves in his mind, turning into runes of scriptures. like a tiny drop of dew or a bubble floating in a stream, like a flash of lightning in a summer cloud, a flickering lamp, an illusion, a phantom, or a dream, so is all conditioned existence to be seen, Yi Futian murmured, remembering a saying in the Buddhist scriptures. After Bitter Zen heard this, he bowed to Yi Futian and said, "It is good." From this perspective, Shenjia the great emperor has already seen through all things in the world. Yi Futian recalled the words he saw when he inherited the divine body of Shenjia the great emperor once upon a time. There was no such thing as the way in the world. Yi Futian got up and put his hands together in a salute to Bitter Zen, saying, "Thank you, Grandmaster, for your direction." Little monk didn't really say anything. "It was benefactor Yi yourself who had come to the conclusion," Bitter Zen replied. "I will take my leave now." Yi Futian didn't say anything more and politely bid his goodbye as he turned to leave. Bitter Zen clasped his hands together while watching him depart. In truth, he really did not do anything nor said anything. Everything was designed by fate. If Yi Futian had obtained enlightenment, it was only because he was already very close to it. Perhaps, there would be another powerful figure emerging from the divine prefecture in the future. In this world, since Donghuang the Great and Emperor Yi Qing, there had not been anyone else who had proven the way for many years. Who would be the next? Perhaps, this was also the pursuit of every top figure: enter the imperial realm, following in the footsteps of Donghuang the Great and Emperor Yi Qing. After Yi Futian walked out of the library, he disappeared right from where he was and reappeared on the ancient peak. He walked to the edge of the cliff on the peak, looking over the sea of clouds, and closed his eyes. In the world of the Life Palace, Yi Futian looked at the radiant scenery in front of him, the sun and the moon in the sky. The stars, also, were shining brightly. Those who had been cultivating with him had completed the world of the Life Palace, as it was gradually becoming ever closer to reality. But at this moment, only those few words echoed in his mind. There was no such thing as the way in the world. Like a tiny drop of dew, or a bubble floating in a stream, like a flash of lightning in a summer cloud, a flickering lamp, an illusion, a phantom, or a dream. So is all conditioned existence to be seen. What was reality? Was all that was in front of him reality? Why did they come into being? Yi Futian watched all this quietly and fell into deep contemplation. The breeze passed him by, and the sun disappeared as if blown away by the wind, followed by the moon and then the stars. Everything in this world seemed to be blown away by the wind. In a blink of an eye, everything had turned into emptiness. In just a few moments, the whole world seemed to have lost its color, and everything ceased to exist. Or rather, it seemed as if nothing had never existed. It was all nothingness, an illusion. The world of the Life Palace seemed to have returned to its origin, and everything was like it was before. In the entire world, only the ancient tree of the world was swaying in the gentle breeze. Some branches and leaves were flying on the swaying tree, drifting towards this world of emptiness. Gradually, the aura of the ancient tree of the world permeated the entire world of the Life Palace, until it was filled with nothing. This aura filled his body through hundreds of meridians, extending throughout all his limbs. In the world of the Life Palace, Yi Futian was observing everything. With a thought, the sun, the moon, and the stars came into being instantly. With just his mind, he seemed to have created a world. He smiled, and he moved his mind again. Everything disappeared once more. It seemed to have proven that Buddhist saying. The Buddhist scriptures were indeed all-encompassing. What great wisdom was imparted by the Buddhas who wrote these scriptures? Yi Futian finally had a sense of completion at this moment as he suddenly passed through the threshold. At this point, he had finally reached the 9th realm in cultivation. The aura of the ancient tree flowed to the outside world. At this moment, above the sky, a terrifying atmosphere was breeding. Yi Futian, who was inside the Life Palace, immediately had a look of caution on his face. Chapter 2495, Different Path. On the ancient peak, Yi Futian opened his eyes and saw the light of Buddha flowing above the firmament. He could perceive that a horrible aura was currently brewing. No. Yi Futian immediately retracted his aura with a thought. In an instant, there was no aura leaking from him, and he was just like any other ordinary person. No sense of the way could be perceived from him at all. At this moment, Futian seemed to be someone who had no cultivation whatsoever. At the same time, that terrifying aura that was brewing above the firmament disappeared as well. It manifested in a flash and dissipated just as quickly. It was as if it had never existed before. What's going on? There was a voice from above Spirit Mountain, apparently sensed by other cultivators. At this time, a great Buddha asked, and his voice resounded throughout Spirit Mountain. I don't know. Just now, there seemed to be an aura of tribulation, but it disappeared in an instant. Why is that? A great Buddha replied, somewhat puzzled. Why did that aura only appear for an instant? Was it tribulation? Many great Buddhas released their consciousness and seemed to appear in another place in an instant. Did any of the Buddhas know what happened? Is it someone with powerful Buddhist cultivation here at Spirit Mountain? I don't know, but no one new came, another Buddha responded. They had all felt the aura at that instant, but no one paid any attention to Futian. Even if they did, they would never know that the aura was produced on account of him. After all, that aura was not from Futian but the sky above. Perhaps we need to consult the Buddha Lords, another Buddha suggested. Perhaps, someone on the level of Buddha Lords would know a little more than they did. However, after that suggestion was made, no Buddha Lords on the Spirit Mountain said anything, which puzzled them. Exactly what had happened? But no one associated the event with Futian. After all, his cultivation was only Renhuang in the 8th realm. Even at Renhuang in the 8th realm, a breakthrough of the realm would only be at the 9th realm, stepping into the realm of peak Renhuang, and would in no way have any connection with that terrifying aura. In fact, at this time, Futian, who was on top of the ancient peak, also had a strange look on his face. Was that aura the aura of tribulation? The moment he broke through the realm, he clearly perceived it, and it was an aura that was beyond frightening. It was definitely not any lesser than the divine tribulations that Gu and Emperor she had experienced previously. Wouldn't this mean that he had ushered in the divine tribulation of the Great Path when he only had the breakthrough the 8th realm, just as he was entering into the 9th realm? If so, this worked against the ironclad rule in cultivation and did not conform to the rules of cultivation. Of course, everything that had ever happened to him was always a little strange. Before, he couldn't break through no matter what he did. But now, with a simple epiphany, he had attracted the divine tribulation. When he retracted his aura, he could no longer perceive the divine tribulation, for it had disappeared again. Cultivators had to go through 3 tribulations when breaking the shackles of Renhuang. Only after the baptism of all 3 divine tribulations could they prove the supremacy of the way, thus achieving the realm of the great emperor. Only then could they be conferred with the title of deity. The existence of tribulation was because the rules of heaven and earth did not allow it. Therefore, the appearance of the divine tribulation was so that the order of the great path would execute those who broke through the realm. If this were the case, then the divine tribulation he had attracted when he broke through the 9th realm would mean that he was no longer permitted by the heavenly path as it currently stood, and that he was going to be sanctioned by the order of the great path. In other words, he was not allowed to step into the 9th realm as it currently stood. Was it for this reason that he had not been able to break through before? What was the reason for all this? How did he offend the heavens? And there was another very crucial question. If he were to survive this divine tribulation of the great path, what realm would he be in? It seemed that he would be embarking on a completely different path from other cultivators. Which path was his path? All of this was yet unknown. He had no idea how strong the divine tribulation would be or what realm he would be in after surviving the divine tribulation of the great path. Perhaps he would only know after he had an exchange with other cultivators. Shoo! Futian let out a long breath and glanced at the light of Buddha above the firmament. A quiet smile appeared in his clear eyes. In any case, he had finally taken this step and passed through the bottleneck. Although he would go on to a different path, he had a feeling that this path would be extraordinary. Both Hua Qingqing and Hua Jiyu had arrived. The other Buddhist cultivators on the Spirit Mountain did not make the associations with Futian. Still, Hua Jiyu and Hua Qingqing had accompanied Futian in his cultivation, and they knew Futian's situation the best. Therefore, As soon as they sensed that aura, they rushed over immediately. Watching Yi Futian standing there, it was as if he was one with the world around him, without any fluctuations of aura on his person. He appeared just like any other ordinary person, yet he was part of the scenery before them. It was completely natural. Then they knew that Yi Futian might have broken through the realm because he was now different again. You broke through? Hua Jiyu asked Yi Futian via voice transmission. Yes, I did. Yi Futian smiled while looking at Hua Jiyu. He responded using voice transmission, not using direct communication. Yi Futian had restrained himself without attracting the divine tribulation because he did not want other cultivators on the spirit mountain to detect that his cultivation was, in any way, unusual. After all, many Buddhist cultivators in Buddhist sect were hostile towards him. Therefore, it was far better to be a little more cautious to avoid appearing overly shocking or out of the ordinary. He did not know if there were other precedents in the history of attracting the divine tribulation of the Great Path while breaking through to the 9th realm from the 8th. If there were, it might have only been in the legends. If so, he would inevitably attract too much attention again, and the news may even be carried back to the divine prefecture. Therefore, he did not want to be exposed and temporarily suppressed the thought of surviving the divine tribulation of the Great Path. Was that you? Hua Qingqing also asked through voice transmission. He was obviously inquiring about the phenomenon from before. It was me, Yi Futian responded. It seems that it was not too far from what we expected. Your cultivation path is different from all the others, Hua Qingqing responded with a smile. Thanks to your guidance, I have been reading and comprehending Buddhist scriptures in the past few years. Not long ago, I had a conversation with Grandmaster Bitter Zen. Only then did I have an epiphany and finally broke through the shackles. Only, I didn't expect it to lead to the divine tribulation. Yi Futian said, you have cultivated with the Buddha himself. Have you ever heard of anyone who had an experience like this? No. Hua Qingqing said, although Buddhist cultivation is somewhat different from the cultivation of the outside world, surviving the tribulation of the Great Path is the same everywhere. In fact, there is no difference between the cultivation of Buddhism and the cultivation of the Great Path in the divine prefecture, Yi Futian responded. It's just using a different method to reach the other side, but the Great Paths are all interconnected. In essence, they are still the same. It seems that you have made great progress in comprehending Buddhist scriptures in these years, and your views on cultivation are different. Nonetheless, the ultimate pursuit is indeed the same, Hua Qingqing responded. We should leave, Yi Futian suddenly said, transmitting his voice to both of them at the same time. He had been cultivating in the Western world for more than 10 years. Next, he would have to survive the tribulation, so there was no point in staying in Spirit Mountain any longer. He would now need to look for a place to prepare himself. In Spirit Mountain, if he exposed the slightest of his aura, he may attract the power of the tribulation. By then, everyone else would know. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,